This story starts with Kenichi, a man who works himself to exhaustion, eventually landing in the hospital. Realizing the toll on his health, he decides to leave his hectic life behind and adopts a simpler, tranquil existence in the wilderness. There he spends his days tending to crops, playing with crows, and unwinding by watching Isekai anime while writing in his free time. One day, as he tries to order ingredients online, Kenichi is suddenly transported to a strange and unfamiliar place. Noticing a corpse nearby, he begins to wonder if he's somehow ended up in a fantasy world. Drawing inspiration from the Isekai anime he's seen, he decides to try summoning a status screen. To his astonishment, it actually works. The screen confirms he's in another world, but something feels off. Unlike the status screens he's used to seeing in shows, it doesn't display health or magic points, nor does it list any skills. Instead, it shows only two options, one called Shangri-La, so Kenichi gets curious and clicks on it and is surprised to find that it's the very same online shopping site he often used in his old world. Then the other feature available is an item box. Testing it out, Kenichi stores some nearby weeds and finds that retrieving them is just as easy. Just then, Kenichi's stomach growls loudly, reminding him of his hunger, so he decides to try ordering food from Shangri-La, but unfortunately, the screen prompts him to insert money, and Kenichi has none. Thinking quickly, he comes up with an idea. He tests whether he can trade items stored in his item box for cash. Sadly, the weeds he picked earlier have no value, leaving him frustrated and empty-handed. Growing desperate, Kenichi's eyes land on the sword sticking out of the nearby corpse. Though hesitant, he decides to trade it in, and to his relief, the sword fetches nearly 100,000 yen, finally giving him the funds he needs to buy food. Kenichi then takes a moment to bury the corpse and thanks it sincerely for helping him survive in this strange new world. Afterward, Kenichi uses Shangri-La to purchase a bike, sturdy boots, and a compass to help him navigate. The compass guides him as he searches for a settlement to earn some money. While taking a break, Kenichi prepares a meal using the supplies he ordered and has a revelation. He can use Shangri-La to order goods and then sell them in this world for a profit, so it's the perfect plan to build his fortune. Kenichi enjoys his meal, but his peace is shattered when terrifying monsters emerge from the forest. He is panicked and scrambles to find a weapon on Shangri-La, and the only option is a bow, but he doesn't know how to use one. He gets desperate and opts for fireworks instead, using them to scare the beasts and buy some time. When the fireworks only provide a brief reprieve, Kenichi quickly orders a slingshot, and to his amazement it works perfectly, allowing him to fend off the monsters, and he emboldenedly keeps attacking until the wolves retreat. With his heart pounding, Kenichi grabs his gear and flees, using a headlamp he purchased to guide him safely through the dark. By the next morning, Kenichi is relieved to see a city in the distance. On his way, he encounters a merchant named Fuyo, who offers him a ride to the city. Kenichi accepts and introduces himself to another passenger. He explains his plan to do business in the city, but Fuyo is puzzled by his lack of equipment. But then Fuyo guesses that he must be one of those special people with an item box. The other passenger, eager to demonstrate, pulls an instrument from her own item box and begins singing a song about their journey, declaring that Kenichi's story is just beginning. Once in the city, Kenichi thanks Fuyo for the ride by gifting him some pepper. Fuyo is amazed but visibly uneasy, questioning if Kenichi plans to sell spices in the city. He warns Kenichi about Bakeopa, a powerful spice syndicate that holds a monopoly on the market, so dealing in spices could attract dangerous attention. Fuyo then loosens up and offers to pay for the pepper, but Kenichi insists it's a gift. But Fuyo, being a proud merchant, insists on paying, making it Kenichi's first sale. Then after Fuyo departs, Kenichi does some quick calculations and is stunned to discover just how much pepper is worth. That evening, Kenichi arrives at a restaurant that doubles as an inn, where the receptionist warmly greets him. He decides to stay the night and pays 1 silver for a room. When the girl asks him to sign his name, Kenichi realizes he doesn't know how to write in this world's language. Embarrassed, he explains that it's not because he's uneducated, but simply unfamiliar with the local script. The receptionist finds his strange attire curious, and Kenichi jokes that it's all part of his business strategy. However, she warns him that the Merchants Guild won't register anyone who can't read, write, or perform basic calculations. To prove he isn't an idiot, Kenichi takes a quick math test and impresses her by solving everything with ease. Reading and writing are still hurdles though, so she offers to teach him how to write his name. The girl then introduces herself as Azalea, and Kenichi strikes a deal. If she teaches him the language, he'll reward her with candy from another country, and Azalea intriguedly agrees. Then when Azalea tastes the candy, she's blown away by its exquisite flavor, feeling like a noble indulging in a rare treat, so she worries that the upper class might confiscate it if they find out. Kenichi, though amused by her reaction, nudges her to begin the lesson. Then as they go over the basics, Kenichi realizes the language shares similarities with the one from his old world. Thanks to Azalea's guidance, he makes quick progress. Impressed by Kenichi's rapid learning, Azalea predicts he'll become a successful merchant, so jokingly says that she might even want to be his mistress someday. But Kenichi reminds her that he's much older than she is and suggests she abandon the thought, but he unintentionally makes things worse by sketching a portrait of her. Azalea, awestruck by the drawing, feels even more special, and between the candy and the portrait, she feels deeply indebted to Kenichi and resolves to repay his Dan kindness. The next morning, Kenichi visits the Merchants Guild to complete his registration. Though the fee is 1 silver, his wallet is running low, leaving him with just 116,000 yen after expenses. Fortunately, the guild allows him to pay in installments, and he receives his official guild ID. Outside, Kenichi wanders through the bustling market, carefully studying the prices of various goods. He notes that a plain plate sells for a small square silver, roughly equivalent to 5,000 yen, while 2 sheets of slightly brown paper cost 1 copper or about 1,000 yen. As he takes stock of knives and other items, he decides to buy a mixed bag of fruit from a quirky fruit seller with a weird marketing style. The fruit is unfamiliar to Kenichi, and though his item box displays their names, he's still clueless about what they are. Thankfully, Azalea recognizes the fruit and tells him she loves them. Back in his room, Kenichi tries to brainstorm his next steps, but ends up passing out from exhaustion. The next day, Kenichi uses supplies he purchased, including a hammer, to construct a stand for his business. Azalea marvels at the innovative clothespins he uses, remarking how much better they are compared to the flimsy ones she's accustomed to. Her excitement surprises Kenichi, who hadn't realized such a simple item could have value. Later, Kenichi unintentionally shocks an old woman by summoning his stand right next to hers. After setting up, she becomes his first customer, purchasing 5 clothespins for 1 copper, and introduces herself as Anama and warmly welcomes him to the area. As hours pass, Kenichi's clothespins sell quickly, much to Anama's delight. Her own sales see a boost simply by being near him, and she expresses hope that he'll stay in the area. Kenichi is thrilled by the success of his pins, but as a savvy businessman recognizes that imitators are bound to emerge and compete with him. Just then, a young man approaches Kenichi's stand, and it's immediately clear he's someone of high status. The man inspects one of Kenichi's knives, intrigued by its pristine condition. Kenichi demonstrates its sharpness, easily slicing through various materials. The knife's price of 2 silver is steep, but the man is impressed and interested. However, he finds the blade a bit too small and asks if Kenichi has anything larger. Kenichi then searches his item shop for something suitable, knowing that certain restrictions make it tricky to find larger weapons. And eventually he discovers a sword, and the young man is captivated by its craftsmanship and beauty. However, the sword carries a hefty price tag of 1 gold coin. While the man wrestles with his desire to purchase it, Kenichi wonders if he asked for too much. Still recognizing the man as a big spender, Kenichi remains confident that his business instincts will pay off. Just then, a small cat person starts sniffing around Kenichi's stand, earning scolding remarks from other catfolk for going overboard. This is Kenichi's first encounter with beast folk, and he can't help but stare in surprise. Realizing his reaction might seem rude, he quickly apologizes. One of the cats, seemingly ignoring the awkwardness, jumps onto Kenichi's stand and points at the roof, asking to buy it. Kenichi initially declines, but then he remembers he can always order more from Shangri-La. The cat person decides to buy 3 of them, and Kenichi, sensing an opportunity, offers a small discount, shaving off 1 copper from the total. However, the cats reveal they don't have copper coins and seem entirely unfamiliar with basic math. Kenichi steps in and calculates the total for them, showing off his numerical skills. Though initially skeptical, the cats are convinced from the blonde man from earlier vouches for Kenichi's accuracy. With the deal finalized, the blonde man also announces he's ready to buy the sword. That evening, Kenichi uses his earnings to pay for 5 full nights at the inn. Meanwhile, in a lavish estate, a noblewoman marvels at the clothespins her maid purchased. So she gets inspired and decides she wants to sell them through her company, and immediately seeks out her father to capitalize on the opportunity. Back with Kenichi, he prepares for a bath using a small tub he recently purchased. Browsing Shangri-La, he discovers drum baths and considers the idea of filling one with water and heating it over a fire for a relaxing soak. As he reflects on all the buying he's been doing, thought strikes him. How does the online shop actually work? The light from the screen doesn't illuminate his surroundings, and he has no idea how the packages are delivered, so a creeping suspicion gnaws at him that the shop might eventually demand some kind of supernatural payment, perhaps even his soul. Unable to make sense of it all, Kenichi decides to give up worrying. Elsewhere, a disheveled girl wrestles a pigeon to the ground, hoping to secure her next meal, but suddenly a voice calls out to her, startling the girl. So she panics and starts running while silently pleading with God not to be discovered. The next day, Kenichi starts setting up his shop and decides to update his inventory. He adds some jewelry to the display, not valuable gemstones, but polished glass pieces that look attractive enough to turn a profit. While he's arranging everything, Margaret the maid from the previous day arrives, saying she's here to buy more clothespins. Kenichi asks how many she needs and is stunned when she requests 100. But when he sees that she has the money ready, he finalizes the sale without a question. As Kenichi packs up the pins, Margaret notices the jewelry and asks if the jewels are made from real diamonds. Kenichi explains that they're just polished glass, but their aesthetic appeal makes them popular. Margaret admires the craftsmanship and asks him to set one aside for her, promising to come back and purchase it later. Business continues smoothly for most of the day, but just as Kenichi prepares to close up, the beast folk from the previous day return. Their serious expressions put him on edge, and he worries they might be here to cause trouble. But before he can say anything, the cat girl Miley gets red up in his face and sniffs. She confidently announces to the others that she smells spices on him. The beast folk erupt in cheers, pleading with Kenichi to sell them some. Kenichi is immediately hesitant and remembering the warnings about the spice syndicate. He knows that selling spices could bring serious consequences. He has no idea how the syndicate operates or what they might do to him if they find out, so he refuses to take the risk. The beast folk persist, but the locals chime in, telling them it's unfair to pressure a newcomer like Kenichi into endangering his livelihood. Eventually, the beast folk relent, understanding his position. However, Kenichi comes up with a compromise. While selling them spices directly is too dangerous, sharing a meal with them isn't against any rules, so he invites the group to join him for dinner, suggesting they meet in the woods outside town to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Overjoyed, the beast folk eagerly agree, and later that evening, they meet Kenichi and Anama at the outskirts of town, ready to cook together and enjoy a hearty meal under the stars. Kenichi prepares to start cooking when Anama asks if she can help. He hands her some vegetables to chop, but as soon as she looks at them, she's amazed at how vibrant and juicy they are. Kenichi explains that he sourced them from a foreign country and guarantees their flavor is as good as their appearance. While the two of them work on the veggies, Miley and the other beast folk are busy by the river, successfully catching a decent haul of fish to add to the meal. Once the ingredients are ready, Kenichi begins prepping the fish, seasoning it with his carefully selected spices. He tosses everything into a pot to cook, eventually creating a dish that leaves the beast folk stunned. They've never tasted anything like it before and are deeply grateful for the meal. However, the delicious food makes them crave alcohol. Anama tries to talk them out of it, pointing out that alcohol is expensive. But Kenichi sees no harm in indulging them a little, so he pulls out a bottle of cheap booze, pours them each a small glass, and makes them promise never to tell anyone about the meal he cooked for them. Anama warns Kenichi that he might be too generous, but he insists that there's no harm in letting them enjoy themselves, especially since they seem like good people. The night becomes lively as they drink together, laugh, and even bathe in the nearby river. But eventually, everyone falls asleep under the stars. Miley, who has grown quite fond of Kenichi, decides to sneak into his bedroll to look for more special spices. The next morning, Kenichi returns to the inn, where Azalea is visibly upset. She scolds him for being out all night, clearly suspicious of his activities. Kenichi tries to explain that he was just hanging out with some beast folk outside of town. However, when Azalea spots Cat Lady fur clinging to his jacket, her suspicions grow. She accuses him of doing far more than hanging out and is furious that he chose to spend his time with the cat girl over her. Later that day, we see that when Kenichi sets up his shop for another day of business, Margaret arrives, but this time accompanied by Primula. At first, Kenichi is momentarily distracted by Primula's striking beauty, but when he spots Margaret standing behind her, he remembers they must be here to buy the necklace Margaret inquired about the day before. He retrieves it and Margaret pays for it before handing it to Primula, who examines it closely. Primula is amazed by the necklace's craftsmanship, finding it hard to believe it isn't made from real diamonds. So she gets intrigued and asks if Kenichi has more of these in stock. Kenichi retrieves additional pieces from his inventory and lays them out for her to examine. Primula is impressed not only by the quality of his products, but also by the fact that he has an item box, a rarity that adds to his intrigue. She then introduces herself as the daughter of the owner of the Malow trading company and expresses a desire to introduce Kenichi to her father, believing he would be interested in working with him. While Kenichi is intrigued by the opportunity to meet the head of a major trading company, he's hesitant to get involved with influential figures because he fears it could lead to complications. However, Anama reassures him, explaining that Primula's father is highly respected in town and known for his good character. Feeling more at ease, Kenichi agrees to go with Primula, and she invites him to join her in her carriage. As they travel, Primula shows Kenichi some clothespin replicas her craftsman attempted to create. While the wooden shape was easy enough to copy, the metal spring proved too complex to reproduce. Kenichi understands their difficulty, as even he doesn't know exactly how the springs are made, only that the process involves a high level of intricacy. Eventually, they arrive at Primula's home, and Kenichi is awestruck by the size of the estate. However, Primula downplays it, explaining that while it might seem impressive, it's modest compared to the mansions owned by the local nobility. Kenichi and Primula then enter the mansion and are greeted by her father Malow, a composed and charismatic man. After exchanging pleasantries, Malow invites Kenichi to sit so they can discuss business. And once Kenichi is settled, he shows Malow some of the jewelry he has in stock, and like Primula, Malow is impressed by the craftsmanship. Primula also mentions Kenichi's item box, which intrigues Malow. He reveals that he owns an item box as well, crediting it as one of the key tools that allowed him to build his trading company to its current success. Malow points out that if Kenichi uses his item box wisely, he could achieve great things too, though it seems Kenichi is currently only using it for storing supplies. Malow then gets to the point. He wants to discuss the possibility of Kenichi becoming the official supplier for the Malow Trading Company. Kenichi, having anticipated a proposal like this, assumes Malow intends to market his products for maximum profit. However, Kenichi questions why Malow didn't simply buy items from his store at a low price and resell them for a higher margin. Malow admits he could have done that, but he considers such tactics underhanded. If Kenichi ever discovered his goods were being resold without permission, it could damage their relationship. Additionally, by negotiating directly, Malow gains a competitive edge over other traders who might approach Kenichi in the future. Satisfied with Malow's reasoning, Kenichi listens as Malow offers him 50% of the retail price for his goods. While Kenichi could push for a higher percentage, he's content with the offer, considering he's already earning significant profits through his online store. He agrees to the deal, and the two shake hands to seal the agreement. After signing the supply contract, Kenichi delivers his first batch of items, earning over 1 million yen worth of coins in the process. As they discuss future plans, Primula spots the beautiful jewels in Kenichi's stock and immediately falls in love with them. She asks Malow for permission to purchase them for herself, and Malow sees no issue with it. Primula offers Kenichi 10 gold coins equivalent to 2 million yen for the jewels, and this transaction gives Kenichi his first ever 8-figure bank balance since arriving in this world. Encouraged by his newfound financial success, Kenichi decides to start building the peaceful life he's dreamed of by purchasing a home from his online store. The next day, Kenichi leaves the city walls and ventures into the forest to search for the perfect spot to set up his new home. But before heading out, he explains his plan to Azalea so she won't worry, but she finds it odd that he willingly chooses to live in the dangerous forest instead of the safety of the city. But Kenichi reassures her that he won't be too far from the city walls, and she thinks he is really an odd one. After some exploration, he finds a suitable location and begins clearing the area by purchasing a weed whacker from his store. However, he quickly runs into a common issue: fuel costs. While most items in his store are surprisingly affordable, fuel is just as expensive here as it was in his previous world. Resigned to the cost, Kenichi pays for the fuel and continues working until he successfully clears a path in and out of the forest. Next, he turns his attention to the trees. To tackle them, Kenichi buys a chainsaw and starts cutting them down one by one. After several grueling hours of work, he manages to fell a significant number of trees. But when he tries to store the logs in his item box, he encounters another problem. The trees are too long to fit. Frustrated but determined, Kenichi brings out the chainsaw again and cuts the logs into shorter 10-meter pieces that fit neatly into his item box. With most of the tree removal complete, all that's left are the stumps. However, with the sun already setting, Kenichi decides to call it a day and return tomorrow. The next morning, Kenichi returns to tackle the stumps. He starts digging, but quickly realizes it's far too much work for someone his age. Unwilling to wreck his back, Kenichi decides to buy a backhoe from his store. But when it arrives, he stares at the massive machine, feeling both impressed and regretful because he just spent 1.2 million yen on heavy machinery to avoid manual labor, so he starts to feel a little regret. However, Kenichi realizes that the amount of effort it saves him might actually make it a worthwhile investment after all. Kenichi then starts the backhoe's engine but quickly realizes a major problem. It runs on diesel and his store doesn't sell diesel fuel. Panic sets in as he considers the massive waste it would be if the machine became useless after spending so much money on it. Thinking quickly, Kenichi recalls that diesel can be homemade by mixing kerosene with additives. However, he hesitates, knowing that getting the proportions wrong could ruin the backhoe's engine. To play it safe, Kenichi decides to test his mixture on a diesel generator first. He carefully fills the generator's tank with his concoction, starts it up, and to his relief, it works perfectly. Confident his homemade diesel will work for the backhoe, he plans to return the next day to finish clearing the forest. That night, Kenichi realizes another issue. The sheer number of bugs in the woods is unbearable. Determined to solve the problem, he visits a local magic shop the next day to purchase some bug-repellent magic stones. The shop's wizard owner greets Kenichi, and asks where he's from since he hasn't seen him around before. Kenichi explains that he's a foreigner who recently opened a shop in town and is looking for bug-repellent stones. The wizard informs him that the stones cost 3 silver coins, which Kenichi finds expensive. Hoping to strike a deal, he offers the wizard 2 oranges as part of the payment. The wizard, intrigued by the exotic fruit he's never seen before, agrees to the trade and lowers the price. Later, Kenichi discusses the wizard with Anama, who tells him the wizard is well known for his vast knowledge and is a good person to befriend. She contrasts this with the town's most infamous figure, Shaga, the leader of a notorious bandit group. His wanted posters are plastered everywhere, and the reward for his capture is huge. And that same night, Shaga organizes a raid on a carriage transporting slaves, leaving everyone wondering what he plans to do with them. The following day, Kenichi returns to the forest, finally ready to use his backhoe. His earlier regrets vanish as he discovers how much easier the machine makes his work, and how much fun it is to operate. With the stumps cleared, Kenichi feels unstoppable in his quest for a peaceful life in the woods. However, his excitement is tempered by the realization that his bank account is running dangerously low after purchasing the backhoe. So for now, he decides to pause any further construction and focus on rebuilding his finances. The next day, Kenichi brings some sugar to sell to Malow, but Malow explains that while sugar and salt are extremely valuable commodities, the nation holds exclusive rights to them, meaning they can't be purchased from private sellers like Kenichi. This news is a letdown for Kenichi, as he had hoped to rake in a huge profit from selling them. However, Malow shares some good news. Kenichi's jewelry has been a massive success. Curious to see what else Kenichi has to offer, Malow is amazed when Kenichi unveils his latest creations. With those items sold, Kenichi adds another 3 million yen worth of gold and silver to his growing fortune. With his newfound wealth, Kenichi is finally able to afford a log cabin. The price seems like a steal, but he's shocked when the delivery arrives because it doesn't come assembled, and he realizes he'll have to build the cabin himself. While the situation is less than ideal, it explains why the price was so low. With no other choice, Kenichi starts working. Thankfully, the assembly process is straightforward, mainly involving putting together wooden planks. And by sheer luck, the beast folk were hunting nearby, and when they saw him, they stopped by to lend a hand because they were grateful for the kindness Kenichi had shown them before. As the construction progresses, Kenichi continues running his stall and weeks fly by. To support the beast folk helping him, Kenichi buys a grill to keep them fed and a one-man tent to camp out near his build site. And after nearly a month of effort, the cabin is finally complete. Kenichi has the beast folk to thank for their hard work, and they celebrate together. To make his new home comfortable, Kenichi buys essentials like a bed and blankets for proper sleep. He starts thinking about additional improvements like electricity, painting the walls, and fixing the roof. Over the next month, Kenichi makes significant progress. He builds a garden with a sturdy fence and sets up a bathroom that recycles waste into fertilizer. The toilet alone cost him over 200,000 yen, while he spent 30,000 yen on a kitchen sink. And for electricity, Kenichi installs 20 solar panels connected to a battery system, which set him back nearly 400,000 yen. His favorite purchase, however, is a drum bath he bought for 25,000 yen. Although he has to haul water from the river using gasoline tanks, the joy of taking his first proper bath since arriving in this world makes it worth every effort. Kenichi takes a moment to appreciate the fruits of his labor. This is the epitome of slow living, a peaceful life in another world as the ruler of his own little domain. With a satisfied grin, he declares that his idyllic new life has officially begun. Later, Kenichi thanks Azalea as he prepares to leave the inn, explaining he won't be staying there anymore. However, she insists she's the one who should be thanking him. The next morning, Kenichi sets off with the camera he bought to take pictures of the wilderness. He couldn't be happier with his slow, idyllic life, but his peace is short-lived. While wandering, Kenichi accidentally triggers a trap and soon finds himself dodging a hail of arrows. He realizes he's under attack by beast folk who have noticed him living in the forest. As they discuss killing him, Kenichi fully grasps the harsh reality of this world. Determined to survive, he goes on the offensive, pulling out his slingshot and firing off several shots Rambo style. He scares the beast folk further by using fireworks, then terrifies them into retreating with his backhoe. After the commotion, Kenichi stumbles upon an injured cat which was struck by one of the beast folk's arrows. The cat, clearly wary of him, refuses to let Kenichi get close. Knowing the animal could be dangerous, Kenichi devises a solution by buying some floor cushions and a neck guard for protection. With his gear in place, he carefully removes the arrow and disinfects the wound. He also administers antibiotics to prevent infection and gives the cat painkillers to ease its suffering. Kenichi worries that the cat might not survive in its current state, so he attempts to put it in his item box only to discover it doesn't work. Left with no other choice, Kenichi brings the injured animal back to his home and there he buys it a pet blanket and sets up a space for it to recover. Unfortunately, the cat barely moves, leaving Kenichi uncertain whether it will make it. Hoping for advice, he visits the old mage to ask if he knows how to heal the cat, but the mage only suggests selling the hide for profit. Anama doesn't have any solutions either, but Miley offers some helpful information. She explains that bobcats are revered as messengers of the gods and expresses her desire to see it. Returning home, Kenichi is relieved to see that the cat has started eating. Miley identifies the attackers as dogmen responsible for firing the arrow, and to stop the cat from licking its wound, Kenichi buys it a collar. Impressed by Kenichi's kindness, Miley decides to thank him on the bobcat's behalf. She then hunts down some birds and Kenichi prepares them on a portable grill. And after seasoning the meat, Miley takes a bite and is blown away by the flavor. She then asks to stay the night so she can help keep an eye on the bobcat and doesn't even mind that Kenichi only has one bed. Days later, the bobcat shows signs of a full recovery, so Kenichi shifts his focus to farming. He buys plants and fertilizer from Shangri-La, but realizes that hauling water from the river every day would be a nightmare. To solve this, he starts planning to dig a well. That night, Kenichi has a peculiar dream and wakes to find the bobcat nudging him. It seems to have fully healed and wants to go outside. And when he opens the door, it dashes off into the wilderness and Kenichi wishes it well in its new life. With the bobcat gone, Kenichi decides to take a short break from his stall and focuses entirely on digging the well. To do this, he purchases an earth drill and an electric well pump. After a week and 50,000 yen spent, Kenichi finally has running water. Just as he's enjoying this success, Primula shows up, saying she hadn't seen him at the market. She explains that Miley told her where to find him and is astonished by the impressive setup he's built, and particularly curious about the giant metal object behind his house. Kenichi quickly improvises, calling it his loyal servant and claiming it's his familiar. Primula takes him at his word, now convinced that Kenichi can use magic. Kenichi, sensing the misunderstanding, rolls with it and asks her to keep this secret to herself. He then points out that the city gate is about to close for the night and guesses that she intends to stay at his place. Primula cheekily turns the tables, acting as though it was Kenichi who invited her to stay. Kenichi warns her that he only has one bed, but Primula shrugs it off, clearly unfazed. She's also astonished to learn that Kenichi has a bath, which only sweetens the deal. Later that night, Primula nervously gets into the bath but panics when the darkness spooks her. So she calls out for Kenichi and insists he stay nearby to ease her nerves. Kenichi makes sure she's comfortable, but when he tries to leave, she stubbornly refuses to let him go. So he suggests she take a bath during the day if she's afraid of the dark, but Primula refuses to miss the opportunity. Kenichi then reminds her that they don't know each other well and that he could be dangerous. However, Primula brushes off his warning, saying she's heard from Miley all about the kind things he's done for the bobcat. Later that night, Kenichi buys Primula a bathrobe, and she immediately suggests they sell it. While Kenichi wasn't planning on selling bathrobes, Primula insists that their customers would love such a luxurious product. After some thought, Kenichi agrees to a limited sale and Primula beams with gratitude. He then buys an 8,000 yen nightgown, leaving her stunned by its softness and quality. She even jokes that with goods like this, Kenichi could become the top merchant in the entire kingdom. Kenichi, however, quickly dismisses the idea, pointing out that attracting the attention of nobles would bring nothing but headaches. He just wants to earn enough to enjoy a quiet, peaceful life filled with good food. Understanding his worries, Primula promises that the Malow company will never reveal him as their supplier. Later, Kenichi surprises her by sketching a quick but flattering portrait of her, and the two head to bed. In the middle of the night, Primula quietly whispers to see if Kenichi is awake, but he pretends to be fast asleep because he knows exactly what she wants. Meanwhile, the mysterious girl from earlier is shown being mistreated by bandits. Shaga, the bandit leader, seems pleased with their loot and listens as his men tell him they've just received a new job. The following day, Kenichi escorts Primula back home, knowing full well that her father will have questions about her spending the night at his place. However, Kenichi is taken aback when Malow simply thanks him for taking care of his daughter. Malow admits he'd been worried about her and jokes about who she could possibly take after. Kenichi then presents Malow with the bathrobes, which he explains are made with exceptional materials. He even pulls out a sample of hot lingerie as a joke and says that this shit would make any man who sees it look like The Rock, but Malow looks so overwhelmed that Kenichi quickly clarifies he wasn't serious. Just then, a maid walks in carrying a stack of documents. Malow explains that the nation has implemented a new system for keeping ledgers, forcing him to rewrite them. He mentions that this system, called double-entry bookkeeping, was invented in the neighboring empire. This revelation shocks Kenichi, as he recognizes double-entry bookkeeping from his old world. Malow further explains that the Empire's rapid growth is thanks to the inventions of a mysterious man. Malow then invites Kenichi to join him as he reviews a new prototype product he recently purchased. Kenichi is stunned when he sees that the prototype is a pitcher pump, and Malow is impressed that Kenichi already knows about it. Kenichi, however, is shocked because this pump is something straight out of his old world. The realization that two such items, double entry bookkeeping and now the pitcher pump, exist here makes Kenichi wonder if someone else from his old world has been reincarnated in this one. Feeling a mix of frustration and competitive spirit, Kenichi tries to showcase a new type of vehicle design, hoping to impress them. However, the attempt backfires as they burst into laughter, assuming his odd-looking sketch was a joke. Primula, on the other hand, begins visiting Kenichi more frequently, often staying overnight. Then one evening, she reveals that she will be leaving on a month-long business trip. And during their conversation, Primula boldly asks for that hot see-through clothing piece Kenichi had shown her earlier. Surprised, Kenichi jokingly assumes there's a special guy she wants to impress. Primula confirms this and adds that he's here right now. Kenichi, in his humble manner, assumes she means him but tells her to value herself more and not fall for an older guy like him. Primula, however, is steadfast, explaining that even her father doesn't mind her spending time with Kenichi. Confused but too tired to argue, Kenichi decides to put the conversation on hold, so Primula asks him to sleep in the same bed for the night. Begrudgingly, Kenichi agrees, but he's still baffled about what she sees in an older guy like him. The next morning, Primula departs for town, and Kenichi is visited by an armored man. It's the same man who previously purchased a sword from him, now introducing himself as Paul. Paul explains that he's investigating rumors about a strange man living deep in the forest, then begins asking questions about Kenichi's peculiar tools and setup. Kenichi brushes off the questions, attributing everything to magic, which prompts Paul to ask if Kenichi is a mage. And to ensure Paul keeps quiet, Kenichi gives him a stack of steel as a bribe, explaining that he's out of swords, but Paul can take the steel to a blacksmith to have one made. Grateful for the gift, Paul decides to share an intriguing rumor he's heard. He tells Kenichi about a mage in the Empire who has demonstrated a bizarre, unheard-of spell. This spell apparently creates a large amount of the yellowish dipping sauce that the mage refers to as mayo something. Kenichi's jaw drops as Paul confirms that it's called mayonnaise. Furthermore, Paul adds that this same mage is rumored to have taken down a ferocious dragon. Kenichi is dumbfounded, wondering not only how someone could defeat a dragon with mayonnaise, but also what kind of person managed to reincarnate into the Empire. The scene then transitions to a month passing since Primula's departure, and Kenichi figured that the Malow Trading Company's caravan should be back any day now. Planning to stop by later to meet Primula, he suddenly noticed some commotion in town and decided to check it out. From the chatter around him, he learned that a caravan had been attacked and Primula had been kidnapped. Looking around, he spotted Malow pleading with passing adventurers for help, but no one was willing to step in since the culprit was Shaga. Even the guild and the knights refused to assist, claiming they needed several days to prepare. Seeing Malow in such despair, Kenichi couldn't help but feel sorry for him. The crowd around them didn't seem interested in challenging a bandit leader with 50 men under his command, choosing instead to hang back and watch while Malow continued to cry out for someone to save his daughter. Elsewhere, Primula was thrown into a cell. She demanded to know what the bandits planned to do with her, and Shaga smirked, telling her that with a hot body like hers, it was no surprise that some perverted noble wanted her for himself. Back in town, Malow had now turned to Kenichi, desperately begging him for help. Kenichi hesitated for a moment, but ultimately assured him that he would rescue Primula. He knew he was being reckless because there was no way someone with his limited combat experience could take on an entire band of bandits. But there were moments in life when a man simply couldn't back down, so he told Malow that he would need money to make the necessary preparations, and without hesitation, Malow handed it over. Meanwhile, a few catfolk who had been observing the situation quickly ran off to find Miley. Malow then informs Kenichi that the bandit base is roughly 40 leagues west, hidden in the old ruins of a castle on the mountainside. Kenichi realizes that if it's 50 kilometers away, he's going to need a ride, so he decides to buy a truck. He then asks everyone around him to step back as he prepares to use summoning magic. When they do, he buys the truck, and as it appears, he climbs on top, explaining to the stunned onlookers that this is a metal carriage that follows his commands. He then asks if anyone is willing to join him on this mission, offering weapons and pointing out the high bounty on Shaga's head. He insists that with a proper plan, they can take them down. However, no one steps forward, believing they stand no chance against a band of 50 men, and they back away, unwilling to take the risk. As Kenichi prepares to leave, a bobcat suddenly jumps onto his truck, and he realizes that it wants to accompany him. He thanks it, appreciating the support. Just then, the catfolk arrive, relieved that they made it in time. They inform him that they will be joining his mission, and he expresses his gratitude. He then hands them weapons, arming them with axes and long machetes, and gives Miley a bow. At that moment, Paul arrives and offers to join them, and Kenichi is pleased to have him but questions why he's in full armor. So Paul explains that he went to retrieve his sword and decided to put on his armor to fully prepare for battle. He unsheaths his blade, and Kenichi instantly recognizes it as being forged from the steel he had given him. Paul then mentions that taking down Shiva and his gang would be an ideal first mission for his wolf Fang. And suddenly, the old mage steps forward, offering to join them as well. Kenichi hesitates, telling him this mission isn't suited for an old man, but the mage merely smirks and fires a fireball into the air. He declares that he was once an adventurer and assures Kenichi that he will be a valuable asset in combat. He also admits that he is curious about the unique magic Kenichi wields. Seeing his capability, Kenichi decides to bring him along. Just then, Anama approaches, asking to accompany them. Kenichi reminds her that they are heading into battle, not on a trading journey. However, Anama insists that while she may not be useful in combat, she can still prepare their meals. Seeing her determination, Kenichi agrees to let her come. He then turns to the gathered townsfolk and adventurers, offering them one last chance to join, but they are unwilling to get involved, so they quickly vacate the area. Just then, Malow desperately asks to go with Kenichi, but Kenichi refuses, telling him that he should focus on getting his wound treated first. He reassures him that Primula will return home safely, and hearing this, Malow is relieved, though still visibly worried about his daughter. Afterwards, Kenichi registers himself at the Adventurers Guild, paying a single silver coin for the registration, and formally submits a request to take down Shaga. We then see his group heading out of town, but as they pass through the streets, murmurs spread among the townspeople. Many believe that Kenichi and his group are simply going to take Malow's money and flee, convinced that a handful of amateurs stand no chance against Shaga. But despite the doubtful stares and whispers, Kenichi ignores them, keeping his focus on the mission. Meanwhile, at the bandit hideout, Anemone hands Primula a piece of bread for lunch, but Primula quickly notices that Anemone looks just as hungry as she is. So without hesitation, she tells her to eat the bread instead. As Anemone eats, Primula asks her if she is also being held captive, and she nods. With a reassuring smile, Primula tells her not to worry, promising that they will get out of there together. Anemone looks at her doubtfully and asks how that's possible, so Primula simply states that someone will come to help them. And when Anemone asks if she means God, Primula sees the hope in her eyes and nods without further explanation. Back on the road, Kenichi and the others continue their journey, and as night falls, they set up camp and prepare dinner. Kenichi makes a simple vegetable soup, but as they eat, the catfolk notice the bobcat enjoying some cat food. Curious, they ask Kenichi if they can try some, and he hands them a portion. To their surprise, they find it delicious. Seeing their reactions, the old mage gives in to his own curiosity and takes a bite, only to realize that he likes it as well. After their meal, Kenichi gathers the group and explains the strategy to take on the bandits. Everyone listens carefully and no one raises any objections to the plan. Aware of her own limitations, Anama volunteers to stay behind, knowing she would only slow them down. Later, Miley moves ahead to scout the enemy base using a transceiver that Kenichi gave her. And when Kenichi speaks to her through the device, she gets amazed. Kenichi then explains that it's a magic item that enables long-distance communication. The old mage, watching closely, remarks that even the Empire likely doesn't possess such technology, so Kenichi tells him to act as if he never saw it. With Miley now scouting ahead, Kenichi decides it's time for the rest of them to move. But before they depart, Kenichi turns to Anama and instructs her to return to the Adventurers Guild if he does not return within a day. He tells her to report that the mission to defeat the bandits has failed, and she nods in understanding. As they approach the bandits' camp under the cover of night, Miley scouts ahead and reports back to Kenichi. She spots guards stationed at the watchtower, while the rest of the bandits are inside getting drunk. Seeing this as the perfect opportunity, Kenichi decides it's time to strike. Realizing he's about to dive into his first real battle, one of the catfolk hands him a nut to eat. Without thinking much of it, he pops it into his mouth, only to discover too late that it's some kind of drug. A wave of euphoria washes over him, leaving him feeling absurdly happy despite the impending danger. With adrenaline and whatever strange substance now coursing through his veins, Kenichi jumps into his truck and gives Miley the signal to take out the watchtower guards. The bandits stationed there notice the approaching vehicle, mistaking it for some kind of monster, but before they can raise the alarm, Miley expertly takes them down with precise shots. She swiftly returns to the truck just as the old mage steps up, unleashing an explosion spell that obliterates the castle gate. The blast shakes the entire camp, sending the drunken bandits scrambling in confusion. Kenichi is impressed and asks for another explosion spell, but the old mage regretfully informs him that he's out of juice. With no time to waste, the rest of the group charges in. The catfolk slice through the panicked bandits with ease, while the knight tests his new sword on them. A bandit then attempts to ambush Kenichi, but the bobcat leaps to his defense and Miley finishes the attacker off with a quick shot. The commotion draws out even more bandits, but Kenichi is prepared. With a wicked grin, he summons his backhoe and drives it like a maniac straight at them. The monstrous machine barrels toward the terrified bandits, sending them screaming in all directions. As Kenichi and his team continue cutting down the opposition, it becomes painfully clear that these bandits are little more than second-rate thugs because they can't even put a dent in his group. While wreaking havoc with the backhoe, Kenichi corners a few fleeing bandits and demands to know where Primula is. As he forces the machine into a secluded section of the camp, it unintentionally uncovers an underground cell, revealing Anemone and several other captives. And seeing Kenichi and his massive machine, Anemone stares in awe, wondering if he might be some kind of god. But Kenichi quickly realizes that Primula isn't among the prisoners. A loud, furious shout echoes through the camp. Shaga emerges, holding Primula hostage. Primula's face lights up with relief upon seeing Kenichi, knowing he's come to rescue her. Meanwhile, Shaga sizes up the group, surprised that someone capable of controlling monsters has come all this way for the girl. Kenichi demands that he let her go, but Shaga has other ideas. With a smug smirk, he presses his blade against Primula's melons and sneers, ordering them to drop their weapons, or she dies. They ignore him, and in frustration, Shaga rips off part of Primula's clothes. He sneers, saying he would have enjoyed her properly if he had known things would end like this. Kenichi then quietly buys a laser sight and instructs Miley to shoot Shaga as soon as he blinds him with the light. She nods, understanding the plan. When Kenichi flashes the light in Shaga's eyes, he instinctively lets go of Primula, and Miley takes the shot. Primula immediately runs toward Kenichi, but Shaga refuses to let her escape. But before he can grab her again, an unseen force suddenly throws him forward, landing him right in front of Miele. She coldly tells him she won't miss this time and fires, killing him instantly. With Shaga finally dead, Primula rushes into Kenichi's arms, hugging him tightly. But thanks to the lingering effects of that damn drug from earlier, Kenichi suddenly feels an overwhelming urge to push her down and claim her right then and there, but he forces himself to keep his instincts in check. As things settle, one of the cat folk quickly heads back to inform Anama of the situation. Meanwhile, inside the castle, the rescued girls take a much-needed bath while Kenichi stores away his backhoe. He provides them with fresh clothes and asks Primula to assist Anemone with washing up. He also hands her a pair of scissors, requesting that she trim Anemone's hair. Seeing the scissors, Primula's merchant instincts immediately kick in, and she asks if she can sell them through her company. In her excitement, she accidentally lets her towel slip, while Kenichi thinks she truly has the mind of a merchant. The other girls quickly alert her, and she gets embarrassed. After their bath, the girls emerge looking refreshed, and Anemone appears completely transformed. Kenichi introduces himself and asks for her name, and as they talk, the group pieces together that a noble was behind the kidnappings. Anemone then hands a letter to Paul, and upon reading it, the old mage realizes why the guild and the knights delayed taking action. It was because of noble interference. Kenichi praises Anemone for her bravery in revealing this information. Later, Anama arrives at the castle, relieved to see that everyone is safe. She notices how small Anemone is and comments that the girl is the same age her child would have been if they were alive. Kenichi is surprised to learn that she once had a child, and Anama solemnly explains that she did, but she passed away during the plague. That night, as everyone settles in to rest, Kenichi lays down exhausted. He notes that there was some grim discussion earlier about disposing of the bandit corpses, but he's too damn tired to think about it now. And with that, he drifts off to sleep, ready to return to Dahlia in the morning. The scene then shifts to Kenichi and his companions returning to town, where Malow and the others are waiting eagerly. They roll in on their truck, and Malow beams with joy as he sees his daughter sprinting toward him. The two share a warm embrace, both relieved and overjoyed to see that everyone is safe. Malow's eyes catch sight of the high-end blouse his daughter is wearing, and she reveals that Kenichi had gifted it to her. They both agree that it's bound to sell for a pretty penny, and Kenichi is no longer surprised that even in such circumstances, business talk still finds its way into their conversations. Malow then expresses his gratitude to Kenichi for rescuing his daughter and asks if he's keeping the loot secured in his item box, and Kenichi confirms that he has. The narrative then flashes back a bit to reveal that the cat folk had once asked Kenichi to store the bandit heads in his item box. They explained that returning the severed heads was essential to prove that they had vanquished the bandits, and given the enormous bounty this time, it would also serve to verify his identity by face. Although it seemed a bit odd for his first time handling such a task, they assured him that he would soon get used to it. Miley warned him that the heads tend to start smelling as time passes, making it challenging to carry them in the usual way. Luckily, his item box made this a non-issue. Kenichi mused that he should have expected such peculiarities in this other world and proceeded to stow the heads away in his item box. He also mentioned that he had gathered various items stolen by the bandits from their hideout, about 100 gold coins, along with assorted rugs, pottery, gems, swords, and other valuable treasures. He recalled that before leaving the bandit hideout, he had asked the girls if they wanted to return home, offering them a ride. Some of the girls admitted that they couldn't go back since everyone they knew at home had perished. Seizing the moment, Kenichi asked if they would prefer to come with him to Dahlia instead. They agreed, and he instructed them to let him know who wished to return and who wanted to join him on the journey. He explained that Dahlia was a vast city with plenty of job opportunities, and Primula even offered them the assistance of the Malow trading company. Kenichi then inquired of Anemone about her home, and she replied that she hailed from Europe Village. Primula added that her village lay some 800 kilometers away. Kenichi offered to take her there, but she declined. Anama then surmised that her family might have sold her off to reduce the burden of too many mouths to feed. Undeterred, Kenichi asked if she would rather come along to Dahlia with them, and she agreed. Later, the group continued their journey toward Dahlia, Kenichi dropping off those girls who wished to return to their own village. The trek took several days, and at long last they reached the town. Back in the present, the scene shifts to the Adventurers Guild, where the catfolk present Shaga's head to the receptionist, who is visibly horrified by the sight. Shortly thereafter, another male receptionist approaches to inquire about the details. Specifically, he asks how many heads there are. The catfolk attempt to provide an accurate count, but since numbers are not their strong suit, they fail to recall the exact total. Kenichi steps in and declares that there are 52 heads, a figure that surprises everyone in the guild. The catfolk then remark that it will likely take them an entire day to inspect all the heads, while Kenichi takes a moment to catch his breath as the inspection proceeds. The old mage soon approaches Kenichi, complimenting him on his impressive magical abilities and the remarkable capacity of his item box. He warns that the nobles will make life difficult for him if they ever learn of his exploits. Kenichi, however, assures him that as long as he keeps his mouth shut, such trouble will not come his way. The old mage, not inclined to divulge any secrets, listens as Kenichi casually adds that he will simply leave town if matters deteriorate. Then Paul informs Kenichi that he is off to meet the local lord, Count Asclepius. Realizing that this meeting will likely involve reporting that nobles were implicated in the incident, Paul confirms this and then departs. Kenichi later mentions that it took the guild until nightfall to complete the inspection of the heads, with the total bounty amounting to 861 gold coins. Notably, Anama refused to claim any share of the reward since she had not contributed any labor. Instead, she asked Kenichi if she might take charge of caring for Anemone, promising to treat her as if she were her own child. Kenichi had no objections to this arrangement and eventually left the guild. Outside in town, Kenichi observes the townspeople jubilantly celebrating the defeat of Shaga and his gang, and as he departs, Anemone trails behind him. Meanwhile, inside the guild, Anama had just brought water for both herself and Anemone, but to her dismay, Anemone is nowhere to be found. Elsewhere, Kenichi explains that he's chosen to remain in town for the day since the gates have already been closed. He makes his way to Azalea's inn, where he hears a bard singing a lively tune about their group's victory over Shaga. Azalea, delighted to see him again, greets him warmly. She teases, asking if it's true that he vanquished a horde of bandits. Kenichi downplays the tale, insisting he did not, and privately muses that if she ever learned the truth, she'd be clamoring to claim the reward from him. The conversation takes a personal turn when Azalea brings up an old promise, asking if he still remembers that he vowed to make her his lover if his business were to succeed. Kenichi is taken aback, wondering if she somehow knows that his fortunes have recently improved. He denies ever making such a pledge and in return, asks if she might spare him an empty room. With a hint of playful theatrics, she feigns tears and questions whether she was nothing more than a fleeting dalliance in his eyes. Tired to continue this shit show, Kenichi retreats to his room, silently thinking that it's only a matter of time before the nobles catch wind of his exploits. That night, as Kenichi slept, Azalea quietly slipped into his bed. Even though he mumbled that he was utterly exhausted from the day, she began to undress, intent on pursuing their intimacy. But their damn moment was abruptly interrupted when Anemone entered the room, causing them to immediately cease their love actions. The next morning, Kenichi reveals that in the end, Anemone decided to stay with him. He then heads over to Anama's shop, intending to hand her off to her rightful care, but to his surprise, she isn't there. Undeterred, he sets about his daily errands. First, he stops by a weapon shop where he sells the arms he had recovered from the bandits for a total of 32 gold coins. Next, he offloads a collection of vases and assorted valuables to the Malow trading company, netting him 35 gold coins. Finally, he takes some furniture to the old mage's shop and earns another 22 gold coins from the sale. In the end, the total reward came to 89 gold coins, which they divided evenly 7 ways, each person pocketing 12 coins. Kenichi decided to present the dresses to Anama and the other women who had stayed behind, and afterward he headed back to his house. There they found Anama waiting, delighted to see that Anemone was safe. Once inside, Anama discovered that Anemone wished to remain with Kenichi. She told the girl that if she came with her, she'd learn the ins and outs of running a business, but Anemone refused. Kenichi then asked if she was absolutely sure. When she confirmed, Anama agreed to let her stay with Kenichi for now, promising that she could always return if things got too rough. Later on, Kenichi escorted Anama to a carriage bound for town and then returned to his own home, where he asked Anemone why she wanted to stick with him. She admitted it was because he had fed her until she was completely satisfied, and they later enjoyed a hearty dinner together. Following dinner, at Anemone's insistence, they took a bath together and eventually spent the night in each other's company. However, later that night, a group of shady-looking men prowled around Kenichi's house to keep an eye on him, and he ended up having a terrible nightmare that left him waking in distress. About half a month later, news came that Paul had been elevated to Baron for his role in defeating Shaga. He was given charge of a small territory, tasked with recruiting new settlers and even on the lookout for a wife. There were even rumors circulating that a noble had been stripped of their rank, something Kenichi found hardly surprising, given that bandits had been hired to kidnap Primula. Not long after, while out in town, they noticed a peculiar bicycle rolling by, which Anemone identified as a draisine. Kenichi recalled that initially Malow and Primula had laughed at his idea. However, once the dust had settled after the Shaga incident, they recognized his foresight. Summoning him later, they gave him 5 gold coins for his idea, apologizing for their earlier mockery and even purchasing the rights to the draisine. Soon after, Kenichi sensed someone was tailing him, though he couldn't pinpoint any suspicious figure, yet he was sure he was being followed. Eventually, the guild managed to wrap up all their paperwork and distributed the rewards. Kenichi used his share to repay the funds he had borrowed from Malow for his preparations, and he split the remainder among the women he'd rescued. In the end, only a single coin remained, which he handed over to Anama, and then she offered Anemone a fruit to eat. And then once again, Kenichi sensed someone was watching him, and this time he pinpointed the culprit. Grabbing Anemone's hand, he bolted from the scene, only to notice an entire group in hot pursuit. He dashed through narrow alleys, deliberately knocking over boxes to slow them down. Yet his escape was thwarted when a carriage intercepted him and the pursuers managed to capture him. They ordered him to climb aboard quietly, explaining that their employer wished to meet him. While feigning compliance, Kenichi quickly purchased some firecrackers and lobbed them into the carriage and around the chasing men. The resulting commotion gave him the perfect opening to slip away from under the carriage. Even as they continued to chase him, he procured a crossbow and successfully intimidated them into retreat with his threats. Just then, Malow arrived, inquiring about the commotion. Kenichi and Anemone boarded Malow's carriage, briefing him on the men chasing them. Malow surmised that the anti-monarchy faction was likely behind the pursuit and advised Kenichi to seek help from the local lord, and he's a man known for his decent nature. Although Kenichi trusted Malow's judgment, he suspected that the lord would inevitably impose taxes in exchange for his assistance that he'd find impossible to decline, and then he alighted at the edge of town. Meanwhile, back at Malow's compound, Malow recounted to his daughter how he had met Kenichi earlier. She recalled that they had yet to thank him for earning their family name and explained that the lord had commended them for inventing the draisine, so much so that he even permitted them to adopt a family name derived from it. As a result, she is now known as Primula ni Draisine. Malow then solemnly told his daughter that their company owed a tremendous debt to Kenichi, and that they must find a way to repay it. Early the next day, Primula is busy getting ready. She recalls how at first she had pegged Kenichi as just a boring old man with a tiny stall. But as she got to know him, she discovered he was both knowledgeable and gentle, qualities that shone through in the exceptional products he stored, which had earned their company handsome profits and a respected family name. This reputation made her desperately try to win him over, even if her efforts initially seemed futile. Yet when he came to save her, it became clear that he truly cherished her. Convinced by his actions, she decided to be with him. However, when she went to his house, she was surprised to find that both the house and the surrounding fields had vanished. Meanwhile, Kenichi is seen riding out of town on an off-road bike. Along the way, he meets Fuyu, and they stop to chat. Fuyu soon learns that Kenichi has become a merchant. He bombards him with questions, even wondering if the famed draisine everyone's been raving about is the custom model Kenichi now boasts. Kenichi confirms that it's indeed specially made for him, and Fuyu asks where he's headed next. Kenichi recalls packing everything into his item box and leaving his old home behind. Although he sometimes wondered if his coming here had a deeper meaning, he was happy to know that his coming here had saved Primula. As he prepares to continue, a bobcat appears. Kenichi bids the creature farewell and wishes it a good life, only to notice that the bobcat follows him as if it too wants to come along. Back in the present, Kenichi tells Fuyu that he's currently on a journey with no fixed destination. When Fuyu asks about the 2 companions with him, Kenichi simply replies that they are his family. With that, he rides off and Fuyu offers a silent prayer for his safe travels. The scene then transitions to Kenichi by a river where he is fishing. As he cooks the fish he's caught, he explains that they are currently searching for a new land to settle. At present, they are about 100 kilometers from Dahlia, with the next town called Estrantia located roughly 5 to 6 kilometers away. Kenichi then serves the fish soup to Anemone and the bobcat, remarking that this simple, unhurried way of living perfectly embodies a slow life. He also recalls that earlier, Anemone had mentioned being 12 years old, though he isn't entirely convinced as she appears rather small for her age. Soon after, we see Kenichi flying a drone, which excites Anemone. She wonders if it might be a form of magic. Kenichi confirms that it is indeed magical and muses that they need to find a permanent place to settle down. Observing that the river they are camping near flows into a lake, he decides to head over there with his companions in search of an ideal spot to establish their base. Riding his bike to the lake, they eventually discover a promising location. To playfully impress Anemone, Kenichi pretends to cast a spell to summon his house, and to her delight, his house materializes. Once everything is in order, Kenichi begins pondering a name for the bobcat. After several attempts, he settles on Vel, short for velvet. Later, we see him teaching Anemone how to read and write, and it's clear she's quickly catching on. He then moves on to instruct her in mathematics, though like most children, she isn't particularly fond of math. As she works on some problems, Kenichi contemplates his need for an alternative fuel source, given that kerosene is expensive. He remembers a segment he once saw about biodiesel made from used cooking oil, and decides to explore the idea further, purchasing several books on the subject. We then see Kenichi immersed in reading these books when Anemone asks what he is doing. He explains that he's studying the texts, and she expresses her desire to read as well. However, he points out that the books are in a language she isn't yet familiar with. Undeterred, she shows willingness to learn, and Kenichi starts teaching her Japanese. The next day, we see Kenichi carefully draping camouflage over his solar panels. Suddenly, he hears rustling from the bushes, and thinking a monster might be lurking, he readies himself for battle. To his surprise, it turns out to be Malow, who leaps out with a bright smile. She chides him for leaving her behind and explains that she had to work hard to track his scent and make it here. She then joins up with Anemone, who is equally delighted to see her, and Kenichi announces that Malow will be staying with them from now on. Later, as they enjoy lunch together, Kenichi asks Malow if Dahlia has remained the same since he left. She recalls that while she was in town, Paul proposed to Primula, which prompts Kenichi to remark that it's fitting she's marrying someone her own age, though he grumbles about missing the ceremony. After lunch, they all take a bath and later settle down to read picture books. Malow laughs that even she can understand the stories thanks to the illustrations, and Kenichi muses that such picture books might be a promising product. Uncertain about crafting books based on fairy tales from his own world, he asks the girls if any familiar tales exist here. They list several, and Kenichi grows curious about one titled The Forest Elf. Anemone explains that the story tells of an elf living deep in the forest who falls in love with a human prince, a union vehemently opposed by both elves and humans. The elf merely meets her end at their hands, but thanks to the fairies, she escapes and eventually finds happiness in the realm of the fairies. After their conversation, Kenichi is seen finishing a drawing for a picture book based on this tale. He then uses a printing machine kit to produce a copy of the book. The girls are amazed by the result, and he then binds the pages with another machine. Finally, he presents a copy to each of them, and they are overjoyed to receive their own little treasure. A boat then approaches their house, and Kenichi asks Malow to take Anemone and keep her safe, as there might be company arriving. She nods in understanding, and Kenichi steps out to greet the guests, a crossbow in hand. The newcomers calmly instruct him to lower his weapon, revealing that they are residents of Santanka, the village across the lake. Kenichi inquires what they want, wondering if any local laws restrict habitation here. They assure him that there are none. They were merely curious, concerned that bandits might have set up camp in the area. Kenichi explains that he's merely a merchant, though they comment that he appears rather well armed. He clarifies that he had to flee his previous city due to trouble, so he prefers to be prepared for any eventuality. At that moment, the bobcat comes over to Kenichi, clearly fawning over him. The beastman concludes that there's no way Kenichi could be a bad person. The man on the boat then introduces himself as Crouton, while the beastman introduces himself as Neamius. Kenichi also introduces himself, and Crouton reveals that he used to work for the government in Estrantia. Neamius surveys Kenichi's home and remarks that everything seems in order, prompting Crouton to apologize for having doubted him. Noticing the picture books Kenichi has produced, Crouton buys one for his daughter. After their brief visit, they depart, and Kenichi enjoys lunch with his companions. Later, we see Kenichi gathering herbs in the forest when Malow appears in a playful mood. She jumps on him, suggesting they should do it now that Anemone isn't around. Though Kenichi is initially hesitant, she drags him along, and they end up indulging in their intimate private rendezvous. Sometime afterward, Kenichi bolts out of his shed and plunges into the river. He explains that the shed had become unbearably hot, and he confesses that he was busy producing diesel, dangerous work involving toxic substances, but he managed to succeed in the end. Once finished, he notices that Anemone is upset with him, as he had been completely absorbed in making diesel over the past few days and neglected her. He asks if they should create a new picture book together, but she remains silent. Then he suggests that they head to Astrantia, and hearing this, Miley volunteers to accompany him, so Anemone happily agrees to join the journey as well. They then set off for the city, trailing after Miley, who's been there several times before. As they approach, Kenichi opts to finish the journey on foot. His first stop is the Adventurers Guild, where he informs the receptionist that he'd like to register with that branch. Both he and Miley present their current guild IDs. The receptionist steps into a back room with them and returns in a hurry, musing whether Kenichi is the fellow who defeated Shaga and Dahlia. Kenichi quickly tells her not to spill his personal details, but when she doesn't quite grasp his meaning, he insists she keep quiet. She agrees and informs him that the registration is complete, charging a fee of 1 silver coin for each of them. Shortly after, they grab a bite to eat. However, the girls aren't pleased with the soup because it lacks a proper stock after all they've grown accustomed to his cooking by now. In response, Kenichi adds some bonito stock to the soup, which finally wins them over. While eating, Kenichi notices a few suspicious figures prowling about, and he spots Crouton heading down a narrow alley with his daughter. Choosing not to interfere, he continues to survey the town until he and his companions come upon the Snowflake Tool Shop. Miley explains that the shop is run by an elderly mage, and Kenichi intriguedly ventures inside. There he finds something rather unusual and asks the old mage to explain its use. The old mage, who bristles at being called old, demonstrates its use by adding water and wine to it, after which the machine processes the mixture and outputs 2 separate streams. Kenichi deduces that the device is meant to separate substances from a mixture, and he quickly recognizes its potential for producing biodiesel without resorting to harsh chemicals. Curious about its cost, he inquires, and the mage states it's 5 gold coins, so he promptly purchases it. Not long after, Anemone enters carrying a grimoire and tells the mage she wishes to buy it. Kenichi's eyes light up the sight of a grimoire. He asks if reading one actually enables a person to wield magic, and the mage explains that it does, as long as the reader has inherent magical power. Intrigued, Kenichi examines the book and asks its price. It's 10 gold coins. He decides to buy it, but the mage informs him that she cannot let him take it immediately since all grimoires must be registered, and she asks him to return in a week. Later, we see them on their way back when they come across Nianias, who is in such a hurry that he quickly takes his leave. Kenichi, sensing that things might soon become chaotic, feels they should head home. Just then, he hears a scream emanating from a nearby alley. Rushing over, he notices that Crouton and his daughter are being threatened by the same suspicious characters from earlier. At first, he tries to ignore the commotion, but when Anemone innocently asks if he isn't going to help them, he finds it impossible to say no. He instructs Miley to look after Anemone, then quickly buys a mask to conceal his identity and confronts the thugs. The thugs demand to know his intentions, and Kenichi sternly warns them to leave the parent-child pair alone or face the consequences of his magic. When they refuse to listen, he intimidates them further by hurling firecrackers and declaring that he will blast them from the inside next, an ultimatum that sends the criminals fleeing in fear. Although Crouton and his daughter are initially startled by his aggressive display, Kenichi soon reveals his true self, calming them down. Shortly thereafter, Nianias reappears, relieved to see that Crouton and his daughter are safe. Later on, Crouton thanks Kenichi for saving them, prompting Kenichi to inquire about the identities of the assailants. Crouton explains that they were grunts from Zutera, the notorious spice syndicate, men he had arrested several times during his government service, who have been targeting him ever since. Crouton's daughter then asks if these are his friends, and he clarifies that they were the very individuals who had sold him the picture book. Excited by the revelation, she thanks Kenichi for the book, and Anemone adds that she had helped him create it. Hearing this, Mary expresses her own desire to make a book, and Anemone becomes equally enthusiastic about collaborating on one. The two kids quickly bond over their shared passion, and Kenichi feels a warm satisfaction at seeing Anemone make a friend her own age. After that, Crouton's family comes to visit Kenichi and Anemone, and they spend the entire day together enjoying various fun activities. By evening, they say their goodbyes, and soon after, Anemone and Mary begin visiting each other's homes and playing together every day. They even collaborate on a picture book retelling Cinderella. However, things take a sudden turn for the worse. One day, Crouton appears at Kenichi's house clutching all his life savings, urgently asking him to sell some medicine because his daughter has come down with a severe cold. He explains that this is a local disease, one so virulent that most sufferers don't survive the night. Miley suggests he visit the old lady mage for her healing magic, but Crouton lacks the funds for that treatment. Instead, Kenichi provides him with a cold remedy meant for children, instructing him to give it to Mary and leaving the remaining cost on himself. Crouton departs and Kenichi sets off on his bike. Later, the old lady mage checks on Mary and reveals that her illness is called chicory fever. She explains that her healing magic isn't effective against this particular malady, which can only be cured with the seeds of chicory blooms found near the spring that feeds the river. Determined, Kenichi decides to gather the seeds immediately, and Crouton volunteers to accompany him. Although Kenichi warns that the journey will be dangerous, Crouton assures him he won't slow them down. Nyanas also decides to join the expedition. The three of them prepare to set out, and the old lady mage reminds them that she needs the seeds by tomorrow morning. Understanding the urgency, they embark on their quest. But unbeknownst to them, the thugs from earlier are secretly watching them, pleased to have found Crouton's home, and anticipating that the situation is about to get even more damn interesting. Kenichi and his group then reach the river's source, and Nyanas suddenly senses something approaching. Everyone tenses up, only to find out that it's just Vel making her entrance. Later, Kenichi purchases a boat to navigate the river and manages to secure one of those coveted chicory flower seeds. Crouton thanks him profusely, exclaiming that this seed might finally save his daughter. As they continue, both Nyanas and Vel spot a disturbance on the horizon. Kenichi soon realizes that a pack of black wolves is advancing, and he decides it's time for a grudge match. He swiftly summons two swords, handing one to Crouton and the other to Nyanas, and declares that he'll keep the wolves occupied while they rush back to Mary. Though Nyanas and Crouton hesitate to leave him behind, Kenichi insists that if they don't hurry, Mary's life could be in serious danger. Without wasting a moment, Kenichi launches an attack on the black wolves using a volley of fireworks, chasing after them while Nyanas and Crouton try to make their escape. However, the wolves turn and give chase instead, and soon the group notices that the goons from earlier are lurking nearby, and even someone among them appears to be controlling the wolves. Just then, the bobcat's keen sense picks up their scent, and she rounds up everyone from their hiding spots. Kenichi then spots a dropped flute, one that belongs to the dogman, and realizes that this creature is the one controlling the black wolves. So Kenichi urgently orders Nyanas and Crouton to get out while they still can, and they promptly make their escape. The dogman then scrambles to retrieve his flute, trying to command the black wolves to pursue his targets, but Kenichi is convinced that the wolves won't be able to outrun a catman. Yet the wolves seem immune to the dogman's orders, their instincts alerting them to something ominous nearby. Suddenly, a massive shadowy beast emerges from the gloom and swiftly takes down the dogman. The goons scatter in terror, but Kenichi, ever the fool, sticks around to watch the carnage unfold. As the beast draws closer, Kenichi fires his crossbow at it. At that very moment, the bobcat leaps onto the beast to distract it, while Kenichi unleashes a barrage of firecrackers, 10 times his usual amount. The brainless beast surprisingly catches the fireworks in its gaping maw, and the explosions detonate inside, visibly weakening it. Not one to be outdone, Kenichi then summons his backhoe and charges at the beast from behind, delivering a crushing blow to its head that brings it down. Surveying the scene, he notices the dogman lying unconscious, and the scene then fades as Kenichi heads back to Crouton's house. Kenichi inquires about Mary and soon learns that the worst is over, and Crouton and his wife gratefully thank him for saving their daughter. Though Kenichi insists he's not one to go around playing the hero, he admits that it was a welcome change of pace. Later, he pulls Crouton aside outside the house and confides that earlier he had saved the dogman, extracting a promise from him never to harm Crouton or his family. The dogman agreed, though he warned that he couldn't control others who might bear a grudge against Crouton. Sensing the danger, Kenichi advises Crouton to relocate his family so they'll no longer be at risk. Crouton laments that he has nowhere else to go, and he even can't move to Dahlia, either because Zudara is linked to Bacopa. Sensing a solution, Kenichi mentions he has a lead, Paul's domain, which was formed recently. He even offers to write a letter of recommendation given his friendship with the Baron, and though Crouton is thrilled at the prospect, he asks for time to consider the decision. Kenichi understands that abandoning one's homeland requires a certain resolve. The next day, when Kenichi returns home, Miley is furious that she wasn't included in such a fun adventure. Kenichi explains that he simply didn't have the time to bring her along, and he also needed someone to watch over Anemone. Miley eventually accepts his explanation, and Anemone expresses heartfelt gratitude for Mary's rescue. A few days later, Crouton and Nyanas depart the city, heading towards Paul's barony, while Crouton's wife and daughters remain behind because Mary is still unwell, and they plan to join him at the barony later. Later, Miley's sensitive nose picks up the scent of a dogman lurking near their house, the same one from earlier. He remarks that it's a relief that Crouton has left, recalling how he warned them that many still harbored grudges against Crouton, but now they needn't worry since he has taken care of those troublemakers. Although Miley remains distrustful of anything a dogman might say, but the dogman insists that his loyalty is not to be taken lightly before taking his leave. When Kenichi asks if he's off somewhere, the dogman reveals that he can no longer live in this city. Later, we see Kenichi at the guild where he has arranged for the beast from earlier to be butchered. The local butcher is astonished to see him arriving with a tusk bear and Tao and asks how the hell you managed to take down something so enormous, which Kenichi says that it's just mere luck. Kenichi then instructs the local butcher to have the meat and the embedded magic stone scooped out because he will sell off the remaining parts. The butcher sets to work immediately, though he warns that it will take until evening to complete the task. With nothing else to do, Kenichi decides to head home for a short break. As he passes by a particular hotel, a sudden chill runs down his spine, so he wonders if someone might be discussing him. Inside the hotel, a familiar face can be seen searching for someone, adding to his unease. Later back at his house, Kenichi fires up his magical contraption to produce biodiesel. He accomplishes this effortlessly and marvels that his production cost has dropped by a factor of 10. Testing the new oil in his generator, he's pleased to see that it runs smoothly. That evening, Kenichi decides to return to the city, informing Miley and Anemone that he'll spend the night there if it gets too late. He makes a beeline for the old lady's shop, where the proprietor informs him that the registration for the grimoire is complete and hands it over. Kenichi notices that the grimoire has a magic stone embedded in its cover. The old lady explains that this stone is integral. The incantation recorded within the book is linked to it, and without the stone, the spell will never activate. Understanding its importance, Kenichi hopes that this purchase will be as valuable as the magical tool he acquired earlier. The scene then shifts to Kenichi collecting the processed meat and the magic stone from the tusk bear. At the counter, the butcher informs him that he may now collect his payment for the materials sold. As the receptionist hands him the money, Kenichi shamelessly glances at her massive melon, an action that clearly makes her uncomfortable. Next, we see him on his way back home when he suddenly gets another chill, thinking he should hurry back before catching a damn cold. But then out of nowhere, someone grabs his sleeve and tells him that she finally caught him. Looking back, he finds Primula and asks her what the hell she's doing here. She wraps him in a tight hug and scolds him for vanishing so abruptly. So he says that if he hadn't disappearance, might have jeopardized her company if the nobles had captured him, but she shrugs, saying it's up to them whether it's a problem or not. Noticing the growing scene, Kenichi tells her they need to talk somewhere more private. Primula insists he follows her to her hotel, and the scene shifts to them chatting quietly in the hotel cafeteria. She recounts how the drazing he once showed them ended up earning her family their name, and she goes on about all the other ways he's helped her and her family. Kenichi, however, downplays his own role, insisting that her family was a big help to him. She then reminds him that he even rescued her from bandits, and he pleads with her to calm down, reminding her that he'd heard rumors she was about to marry Paul. Primula laughs it off, admitting that while there was talk of it, she ultimately turned him down. Kenichi admits he thought such a union might have been perfect, but before the conversation can go further, Primula changes the subject. She mentions that both Anaman and the old mage were upset with him for disappearing without a proper goodbye. He confesses that he did feel guilty about leaving abruptly, but he never wanted to cause trouble. Yet she insists he wasn't causing any trouble at all. Accepting this, he suggests that she should head home now that she's reassured him, but Primula stubbornly refuses to leave without him. But Kenichi has no plans of returning soon, so she decides to stick around with him. Kenichi then asks how she managed to figure out he was in this city. Primula explains that she's been diligently checking with the guild to see if he registered in any other city, and one day she discovered that he had indeed enrolled in the local guild in this city. So without wasting a moment, she hopped into a carriage and rushed here. Finally, she boldly asks him to make a woman out of her tonight, a request that leaves him uncertain. But she insists, so Kenichi knows better than to refuse a hot lady's insistence, and he finally agrees. The scene then shifts to Primula's room, where Primula wastes no time disrobing, and soon enough she and Kenichi share a very intimate moment. The next day, when Kenichi returns to his mansion, Miley and Anemone are taken aback to see him accompanied by a woman, only to realize that it's Malow's daughter. Primula is visibly upset that Kenichi left her behind, but he brought both Anemone and Miley along. Kenichi says that he didn't plan to bring Miley, she simply followed his scent, and he couldn't leave Anemone alone since she's just a child. Clearly, Anemone isn't happy seeing Kenichi and Primula grow closer, and soon both she and Miley start vying for his attention. Anemone then blurts out a question, asking Kenichi if she's going to stay with him from now on, worried that it will make their house feel too cramped. This sparks a rivalry between her and Primula. Kenichi urges them to get along, and although Anemone hopes he won't bring more people into the mix, he hesitantly agrees. Then Primula notices Vel and is surprised to see that Kenichi brought the bobcat along, even though she expected him to bring her instead. Kenichi explains that Vel followed him too. Later, Everyone argues over who gets to sleep closest to Kenichi, and he eventually puts the squabble aside to take a bath, remarking that he even bought an extra tub now that their little family has grown. We then see Kenichi bathing in one tub, while Mayuri and Anemone share another. However, Anemone insists on joining Kenichi in his tub, though he's unsure at first he can't really stop her, and they end up bathing together. Primula eventually comes to join them as well, but she feels too shy about sharing the bath with everyone. Kenichi tells her she can have a private bath later, but she becomes frightened of bathing alone at night and opts to join Mayuri instead. After their bath, Kenichi attempts to cast the fireball spell from the grimoire he acquired, only to have it fizzle out. Disappointed and thinking he has no power, he's about to give up when suddenly Anemone just for fun recites the spell. And to everyone's astonishment, a fireball erupts right in the middle of the house, leaving everyone utterly astonished. Kenichi then quickly buys a fire extinguisher, and together with the girls they quickly put out the fire that had broken out. Anemone apologizes for causing the commotion, but instead of being upset, Kenichi is excited and impressed that she managed to use her magic in the process. However, the excitement is short-lived as Anemone suddenly faints. They take her to bed, and by morning her fever has subsided. Kenichi then hands her a can of peaches, which she enjoys immensely. The other two girls are also intrigued by the peaches, remarking that they taste like a fruit fit for nobles. A few days later, once Anemone has fully recovered, Kenichi invites Mary and her mom over, since Mary too has gotten better. They gather for a lively barbecue featuring tusk bear meat, but Mary complains that the meat is too tough and difficult to chew. Agreeing with her, Kenichi tenderizes the meat using soy sauce and a blend of spices before barbecuing it again. This time, the meat turns out delicious and everyone enjoys the meal. After dinner, Kenichi prepares a hearty soup using the leftover bear stew, leaving everyone amazed by how good it tastes. Later, we see that Anemone and Mary have finished the picture book they were working on, and Primula exclaims that it has great potential for sales. She decides to start a business in Astrantia based on their creative project, prompting Kenichi to jokes that he might have just ignited her mercantile spirit ass. When he asks her what else she plans to sell besides the picture book, she explains that she intends to market the bear stew and a dish called stewed rinkus. Mary's mom chimes in, confident that these products will sell. After all, she's never tasted anything as delectable even in Astrantia. The others share her enthusiasm, and Mary's mom even offers to help Kenichi's wife sell the goods as a way to repay him for everything he's done for their family. Primula beams at being affectionately dubbed Kenichi's wife, and Mary's mom, drawing on her experience as a waitress, promises to be a tremendous help. Kenichi agrees to the arrangement, and Mary also decides to pitch in. When she asks Anemone what her plans are, Anemone simply declares that she wants to stay with him. The next day, Kenichi drops Primula off in town and buys her a utility cart, sending her off to conduct business. Later in town, Primula and the girls are seen selling their stew, which quickly becomes a hot item. A crowd gathers to sample it, with many insisting that it's sophisticated enough to be served to nobles. However, the atmosphere soars when a group of rough-looking men suddenly appears and begins to stir up trouble. They loudly claim that a bug was found in the stew, launching a frenzied outcry about poor hygiene in their stall. The scene then shifts to Kenichi using his drone to survey the cliff near his house, and he is amazed to discover that the plateau above is teeming with untouched resources. Convinced that there's a treasure trove of materials waiting to be harvested, he listens as Anemone, peering through her binoculars, spots some sparkly stones on the cliff's edge. Curious, Kenichi takes a closer look and realizes he's never seen an ore like this before, so he's got a feeling they'll fetch a hefty price. Wondering how to mine them, he glances at the time and notes that it's already evening. Deciding to seize the opportunity, he heads back to town to pick up Primula. There he meets Primula and the others, and she excitedly informs him that they sold out today. Kenichi is surprised by her success on her very first day, but he figures it must be thanks to his good food combined with her sharp business sense. Then he asks who the beast woman with her is, and Primula explains that she saved them when some troublemakers were causing a ruckus at the store. Apparently, she told those men that she'd seen them tamper with the stew by adding a bug, and when they refused to admit it, she pointed out that they likely still had bugs in their pockets as proof. The ruffians were so taken aback by her knowledge that they left, realizing they couldn't win the argument. Primula then mentions that she's hired the beast woman as a bodyguard. Kenichi thanks her for helping out, but the beast woman with a cheeky grin says the incident actually worked in her favor because Primula had rewarded her with a small silver coin just for giving a stern glare at the troublemakers. She considers the job an easy one and introduces herself as Nyamena, and Kenichi introduces himself in turn. Kenichi then heads back home, and there Mayuri and Anemone welcome him warmly, but they're surprised to see that he's brought another woman along. Kenichi explains that she's Primula's new bodyguard. So Malow is relieved to learn she is in yet another one of his conquests, and Kenichi adds that Naomena is only there because Primula wanted to treat her to dinner. The bobcat then greets Kenichi at the door, and Naomena becomes shocked at the sight of Bobcat. Later that evening, Naomena sits down to dinner and gushes that the meal is fantastic, but she laments that it would be even better with a glass of wine. Kenichi obliges by handing her some, though he sheepishly admits it's the cheapest wine he could find in the store. Naomena marvels, declaring the place feels like paradise with such scrumptious food and wine. Not long after, Kenichi casually asks if she'd like to take a bath. Surprised and delighted that they even have one, Naomena nods, while Anemone volunteers to heat up the water using her fire magic. Kenichi watches with a trace of worry, wondering if it's safe for her to cast fire magic in rapid succession, but Primula reassures him that every use of magic only strengthens their abilities. Eventually, everyone settles into a long, relaxing soak in the tub, and later they dry off, feeling refreshed. Afterwards, Naomena admires the beds, confessing that she could live here forever, but Malow quickly objects, pointing out that the house is already cramped with the 4 of them. Later, Kenichi begins Anemone's classes, much to Naomena's surprise at seeing her study. Kenichi explains that learning to read, write, and do arithmetic will broaden her future opportunities. He adds that he's heard women have few options in this world, a fact that Naomena grimly acknowledges, noting that many are forced to sell themselves to survive. Kenichi then suggests that Anemone work with Primula to learn the ropes of business, but Anemone is adamant about pursuing magic and one day slaying dragons with him instead. Kenichi, however, is not keen on grand adventures. He'd much prefer to lead a slow, peaceful life. In the meantime, Primula's stall continues to flourish each day, and Kenichi manages to build a scaffolding to scale the cliff. When he finishes, he notices it's already late. Primula returns from work and asks him if he's just storing all that junk in his item box. He admits he does have many secrets locked away, but he can't reveal everything. And he adds that everyone has a few secrets, and he's sure she has 1 or 2 of her own. Suspicious yet intrigued, she watches as he plants a kiss on her, whispering that now is the time to leave if she wishes, but she refuses to leave him. Naomena is watching the hot scene, hoping they will engage in such antics in her presence, as it frustrates her. Kenichi then jokingly asks if she doesn't have a man, remarking on how charming she is, but she coolly replies that she prefers to steer clear of useless men. The next day, Kenichi is busy cutting grass around the scaffolding while Primula takes the day off to explore the other side. Once they all climb up, Kenichi reveals that he's also invited Mary and her mom to join the outing. They then disperse to pursue various interests, and Kenichi starts drilling into the wall of the cliff. He extracts an ore, examines it, and discovers it's called rhodonite, and a single piece is worth more than 200,000 yen. Excited at the prospect of striking it rich, he mines several more, eventually accumulating a total value about 1 million yen. Later that evening, Kenichi turns his attention to dinner, preparing gyoza with the help of the girls. When the meal is finished, they all sit down to taste it, marveling at how delicious it is, especially considering it's made from bear meat. Primula is particularly impressed by the tangy yellow sauce, which Kenichi explains is called mayonnaise, a condiment that, according to Naomena, has recently become very popular in the empire. She adds that it was even created by a mage using magic, a comment that reminds Kenichi of the ingenious innovator behind double-entry bookkeeping in the pitcher pump. As they continue dining, Kenichi wonders if the mage is also eating gyoza, and then Primula asks if he used magic to make the gyoza, but he insists that his secret lies in a simple recipe: vinegar, eggs, and some oil. Surprised by this down-to-earth method, Primula begs him to teach her the recipe, and he promises to do so later. Soon, as they resume eating, Primula mentions that she'd love to sell the gyoza at her stall. Kenichi reminds her that it's a labor-intensive process, to which she retorts that she can always hire extra staff. Kenichi smiles, acknowledging that she truly is a full-fledged merchant. Not ready to call it a night yet, Kenichi decides to prepare another dish. This time he cooks a steak, and Naomena thinks that it's so delicious, but then her keen nose picks up a distinct aroma, and Kenichi reveals that it's wine. She eagerly requests a taste, and Kenichi warns her that the wine is potent, but he can't resist her pleading, so he pours her a generous gulp. And before long, she becomes completely drunk and clings to him. Miley, disapproving of the display, drags her away, but Naomena assures Miley she has no intention of stealing Kenichi away, and she even asks if she can stay with everyone. Miley, however, sternly refuses, ordering her to leave immediately. Kenichi intervenes, reminding Miley to behave, as Primula still needs her as a bodyguard. Although Miley remains wary of Naomena, Primula trusts her and ultimately agrees to let her stay, knowing well that Naomena's interest lies solely in the food and not in Kenichi himself. Later, we see that Naomena has set up her own room in the shed. She casually asks Kenichi if she needs to pay rent, to which he replies that she doesn't. Teasingly, she asks if he's trying to tame her, but Kenichi laughs it off, saying he isn't, and he just wants her to keep helping out Primula. As he moves to leave, Nyamena leans in and playfully asks if he's not going to do anything to her after spending a room alone with her. Just then, Miley steps in, diffusing the tension before anything perv happens. Both Nyamena and Miley tell Kenichi that he's free to do as he pleases with them, leaving him momentarily bewildered about what the hell to do next. A month later, Primula's stall has expanded so much that it's now known as Corolla. She's hired new staff, one of whom is named Iris, who is training to become the chef for a new branch she plans to open. As more time passes, Kenichi reveals that he's managed to mine rhodonite worth 15 million yen. He also mentions that Anemone has started gathering herbs atop the plateau, while Miley and Nyamena have turned the area into their personal hunting grounds. Soon after, it's announced that Corolla has rented a warehouse in the city, and they've begun preparing their products there. Daily profits range from 150,000 to 200,000 yen, with an estimated annual profit exceeding 70 million yen. With enough staff on board to open 2 new branches, Iris has even taken on the role of trainer for the other chefs. Kenichi marvels at this success, remarking that this is the true power of a top-class merchant, and that Primula is operating on an entirely different level than he is. That night, as the group winds down, Primula thanks Kenichi, saying that all her success is thanks to his delicious food. Kenichi reflects that the power of his old world is not something to be trifled with, and he silently hopes that this prosperous trend will continue, though he knows that change is inevitable. Elsewhere, the Queen is in conversation with Princess Lilith. The Queen informs Lilith that the bandits near Dahlia have been defeated, apparently by a mage capable of summoning iron beasts. Lilith comments that such a feat must be a heavy blow to the royalist faction, and she wonders aloud who could have possibly summoned those iron beasts. The Queen then reveals that the mage in question has taken up residence in Estrantia, an unexpected twist of fate that intrigues Lilith. The Queen states that the spirits must have guided him there, hinting that something significant is about to unfold in that region. The following day, Primula introduces herself to Mr. Eupatorium's wife, Canon, and they engage in a friendly conversation about her father's company and their thriving trade business. Meanwhile, Kenichi pays a visit to the old witch to purchase a book on explosion magic. As a kind gesture, the old witch also presents Anemone with a gift, a book devoted to household magic. Later that evening, while gathered with his friends, Primula informs Kenichi that Lady Canon is in need of an elegant brooch. Apparently, during her recent trip to Dahlia City, she had taken notice of the brooches sold by Malow's company and left the city in a state of discontent. In response, Kenichi hands Primula a beautifully carved stone featuring the likeness of a woman. When Primula examines it, she is struck by the resemblance to Lady Canon. So Kenichi instructs her to present it to Canon, emphasizing that he made it especially for her. The next morning, Miley brings news to Kenichi about some newly discovered dungeons in the area, details she had withheld previously to keep Nyamena in the dark, as she still harbors a dislike for her. Not long after, Anemone declares her desire to join the expedition, and Kenichi readily agrees. Setting off together, the group is captivated by the dungeon's breathtaking beauty, prompting Kenichi to snap some photos with his camera. They soon come across several glittering crystals, and Kenichi employs a rocket tool to collect them, hoping these valuable finds will fetch a fortune. But suddenly, a strange presence emerges, and it's a giant spider, so instantly they brace themselves for battle. Kenichi then fires his crossbow at the monstrous arachnid, but his bolts seem ineffective. Miley then takes aim with her bow, targeting the spider's eyes, which weakens it noticeably. So Kenichi instructs Anemone to use her magic to strike at its eyes as well, but fear holds her back, and the spider launches a vicious attack, forcing the team to retreat. Outside the dungeon, an ashamed Anemone apologizes to Kenichi for her hesitation, and he gently reassures her that she's still too young for such perilous escapades. That night, as everyone soaks in hot water to unwind, Nyamena seethes with anger for not being informed about the dungeon expedition. Undeterred, Kenichi announces that he plans to return to extract more crystals. This time, Nyamena insists on joining the next trip, especially since Primula has taken a few days off from work, and Kenichi agrees. Later, in a quieter moment, Kenichi informs Anemone that he has finished recording the new spellbook. Brimming with excitement, Anemone eagerly opens the book to read, but Kenichi quickly intervenes, advising her that she should continue her training first before diving into the contents of the book that will burn the whole house. The next morning, the group resumes their training before heading back into the dungeon. Kenichi picks up where he left off, meticulously collecting crystals along the way. Suddenly, the giant spider reappears, prompting the team to spring into action according to their carefully laid plan. The girls quickly hurl poison at the arachnid to disrupt its web spinning, while Anemone seizes the moment to launch a fiery fireball that incinerates it completely. With the threat vanquished, the group continues their exploration, until the spider reappears and another fierce battle erupts. Just as tensions rise, a second spider emerges, this time revealed to be a female. Kenichi deduces that the larger female is likely the nest guardian, remaining in her lair while the now-deceased male once roamed in search of food. Since she can no longer hunt, he figures that she will eventually perish from starvation. The group decides to leave, but the female spider blocks their exit. The girls again attempt to neutralize the threat by throwing poison, and Anemone casts a series of spells, but nothing seems to budge the relentless creature, which continues its assault without retreating. Thinking quickly, Kenichi devises a new strategy. He purchases a bulldozer. With Anemone at his side, he rides the machine straight at the spider. He swings the bulldozer's shovel with all his might, but the creature clings stubbornly to the metal and even begins climbing it. In a swift counter, Anemone unleashes a burst of magic to knock the spider off balance, giving Kenichi the opening he needs. He then delivers a final, crushing blow with the bulldozer's shovel, ending the creature's life once and for all. With the passage finally cleared, Kenichi gathers additional crystals before the team exits the dungeon. Back at home, the moment Primula catches sight of a spider, she screams in terror. The rest of the group rushes indoors, only to discover that Kenichi has brought back a spider egg. He explains that contrary to their fears, the egg is extremely useful, and when cooked, it is packed with vitamins and bestows great strength upon those who consume it. Skeptical yet curious, the girls sample the dish, and they are delighted by its rich, unique flavor. Primula then exclaims with excitement that the dish tastes just like cheese, and she explains that in the kingdom of Catan, cheese is produced only in select regions, making it extremely expensive. And this revelation sparks an idea in her to start making and selling cheese as a lucrative venture. Kenichi chimes in, remarking that cheese making is actually quite straightforward because it only requires milk and apple cider vinegar. He then demonstrates by crafting a sample cheese for everyone to taste, and they all agree that it's absolutely delicious. Primula becomes eager to share her newfound passion and expresses her wish to teach Lady Canon the art of cheesemaking. However, Kenichi initially refuses, explaining that he doesn't want to deal with nobles. Noticing that there's more behind her insistence, he presses for details, and Primula confesses that just a few days earlier, the corrupt merchant Thugalum had been harassing her at her stall. Although Nyamena urged her to inform Kenichi, Primula begged her to keep it quiet. Immediately, Kenichi vows to protect Primula from the unscrupulous merchant. Yet Primula is determined to settle the matter on her own terms through savvy business tactics and convinces Kenichi to let her handle it. Relenting, he agrees that Primula should go ahead and even teach Lady Canon the cheesemaking process. The next morning, with Lady Canon's assistance, Thugalum receives a stern letter warning him to stay away from Primula's shop. And later we see Primula and the girls running their restaurant with infectious enthusiasm and success. In another twist, Queen Canon herself pays a visit to Kenichi's home. He welcomes her warmly, and she expresses admiration for his adventures, especially his tireless efforts to help the weak. Intrigued, Kenichi asks why she traveled all this way to see him. But before she can answer, the queen suddenly seems to fall ill, her face paling as she grows weak and dizzy, leaving everyone concerned about her well-being. But anyway, it turns out that everything was just an act on her part because she needed something from Kenichi. Essentially, her husband, Mr. Eupatorium, was tasked with building a canal through the kingdom. However, he's running dangerously behind schedule, and if the project isn't completed soon, his funding will be cut and his land might be seized. With 15 kilometers of the canal still left to construct and a deadline of 1 month looming, Lady Canon begs Kenichi to lend his assistance. She even offers him any reward he desires, even her body, but Kenichi firmly tells her that he's not interested in that shit. Disappointed by his refusal, Lady Canon isn't ready to give up just yet. She offers Kenichi a special grimoire called High Protection as his reward. Although Kenichi isn't entirely sure what High Protection entails, Nyamena explains that it's an extremely powerful spell capable of blocking any attack, a prospect that immediately piques his interest, especially since it could help protect Anemone. Convinced by this offer, Kenichi agrees to help her, but before any construction can commence, he needs funds. He asks Lady Canon to give him any unused furniture she might have, so that he can appraise it using his system and raise the necessary money. By the time he's finished, Kenichi earns about 120 million yen, and it's more than enough to cover the cost of employing his heavy machinery. Ready to begin, he loads everyone into his car and drives them to the construction site. Along the way, Lady Canon cheekily asks if he really doesn't want her body as a reward. Kenichi flatly refuses, which only infuriates her since she knows he has no qualms about sleeping with beast women, so she asks why he wouldn't sleep with her. Eventually, they arrive at the construction site, where Kenichi unexpectedly runs into Miley's brothers. While it's nice to see them again, Kenichi can't help but wonder why they're working on construction when they should have been set for life after receiving a huge payout for killing Shaga. But apparently one tavern led to another, and after one wild night, they're broke once more. Suddenly, Nyamena appears to see what's happening, and immediately, When Miley's brothers catch sight of her, they practically fall in love. Moving on, Lady Cannon introduces Kenichi to Porridge, the man she hired to oversee the construction work. Porridge remarks that she didn't mean to come out here in person, but Lady Cannon insists it's important, especially since she's brought someone to help. She explains that Kenichi as a mage will be able to accelerate the process dramatically, though Kenichi modestly retorts that he's just a merchant. In any case, Porridge has no reason to refuse additional help, so he agrees to continue his work and asks Lady Cannon to review the bill for the equipment required. While Lady Cannon examines the invoice, Primula takes a look as well, and she's immediately disgusted by the exorbitant prices listed. She pleads with Lady Cannon to let her handle the bill, and after reading through the entire document, she becomes convinced that Porridge is trying to rip her off. Porridge defends himself, arguing that he needs to make a profit from the deal, and that there aren't any other merchants who could supply 1,000 axes as easily as he could. But he's quickly proven wrong when Primula turns to Kenichi and asks if he can source 1,000 axes. Kenichi promptly purchases the axes from his store and asks Lady Cannon if an axe like this will suffice. She replies that it's perfect, but she's curious about the cost. Primula then chimes in explaining that Lady Cannon would only need to pay 1 silver coin per axe, a ridiculously low price. Lady Cannon is delighted by this offer, and with a smile she asks Kenichi if he's truly comfortable with it, so he casually tells her to think of it as a friend discount. Overjoyed, Lady Cannon declares that she will buy the axes from Kenichi instead and promptly fires Porridge. Enraged, Porridge reminds her that he represents the Thogalum Trading Company and that defying them could spell serious trouble. Kenichi recalls that Thogalum was behind all the issues at Primula's stall and that he wields such influence that even the Lord occasionally seeks his help, so getting on his bad side would surely cause more problems. However, with the construction of the canal taking precedence, everyone quickly shifts their focus to work. Then, since Kenichi's backhoe is going to be used extensively, he knows he'll need a lot of fuel. He pours out 3 basins worth of fuel, and within minutes, the work finally begins. Kenichi's machine proves to be a tremendous asset, accomplishing in mere minutes what would have taken them hours to complete. After a long day of work, Kenichi cooks up a hearty meal for his friends and graciously offers some to Lady Cannon. She's pleasantly surprised that he can whip up such delicious food right in the middle of the forest, and every bite tastes absolutely divine. Noticing Miley's brothers eyeing the food from a distance, Kenichi invites them to join in. But they aren't the only ones feeling the hunger. Nearly all the workers are famished as their usual tavern is in the city and the journey there's far too expensive. Feeling sympathy for the laborers, Primula comes up with a clever idea and asks Kenichi for permission to use his recipe to feed everyone. Of course, she'll still charge a fair price so that the meals remain affordable. The workers are overjoyed to have such nourishing food available, and soon the work site transforms into a festive gathering, much to Lady Cannon's delight at the newfound liveliness. Later that evening, Kenichi sets up a makeshift bath and invites Lady Cannon to use it to freshen up. She's amazed that he can create a proper bath in the midst of the woods. However, as Kenichi prepares to leave, Lady Cannon suddenly grabs his arm and orders him to join her in the bath. Kenichi struggles to resist because technically he is married to Primula and has responsibilities toward Anemone, so he simply can't indulge in such moments whenever he wishes. Lady Cannon, however, admires how deeply Kenichi cares for his family, something she never experienced as her own family barely acknowledged her individuality, caring only about whom she would marry. Kenichi sympathetically remarks that sounds sad, but quickly adds that it's none of his business, and he hurries out of the bathroom before Lady Cannon can make another attempt at seduction. The next morning, Kenichi rises early and immediately notices Lady Cannon hard at work, distributing food to all the laborers. For a brief moment, a mischievous thought flits across his mind. Perhaps it wouldn't be so terrible to make Lady Cannon taste of his Japanese stick. But almost immediately, all the girls crowd around him, clearly picking up on his fleeting thought. He quickly dismisses it, insisting that he wouldn't actually sleep with Lady Cannon because she's married, and he's smart enough to avoid such drama. Lady Cannon, for her part, understands that Kenichi isn't interested in her romantically, but she's determined. With a whole month ahead of them, she's convinced that sooner or later she'll make him give in. A few moments later, Porridge and one of his associates return to the worksite, grumbling that none of the workers have been patronizing the tavern they run. Primula explains that it's because she started selling food at an affordable price right there at the site, so the workers no longer need to travel into the city. She makes it clear that the loss of customers isn't because she stole them, but simply because the tavern's prices were sky high. She adds that if they ever hope to recover, they'll need to be more honest in their business practices. After that, work goes on as usual, and once the trees are felled, Kenichi drives his backhoe to gather all the wood and debris into his storage. Progress on the canal is steady, and by noon, Lady Cannon's servants finally arrive, swelling the number of people on site. Soon, water becomes an issue. Although Kenichi could purchase water from his store, the cost is prohibitive. Instead, he decides to strike a deal with the beast folk. They mention a nearby spring, but it's nearly impossible to access without cat-like agility. So Kenichi offers them alcohol in exchange for fetching the water, and since the beast folk adore alcohol, they eagerly accept his proposition. And before long, the water supply problem is resolved. As the day winds down, and while the beast folk happily indulge in their alcohol, Kenichi announces that he's ready for bed. But just before he can depart, a drunken lady cannon clutches his arm and begins dragging him toward the bedroom. Kenichi, however, remains steadfast and refuses to give in to temptation. Instead, he uses her inebriated state as an opportunity to have her sign a paper, clearly stating that she will not try to ambush him again. Sometime later, after Lady Cannon finally drifts off to sleep, Kenichi quietly leaves the guest room and attempts to return to the main house. However, Anemone stops him, complaining that he still carries Lady Cannon's damn scent. Eventually, Mr. Eupatorium's section of the canal is completed just within the 1-month deadline and is officially inaugurated at a ceremony attended by the royal family. Kenichi had hoped to avoid the ceremony entirely, but Lady Cannon pressured him into attending. In the middle of the proceedings, she unexpectedly calls on him. With no choice but to demonstrate the unique magic that made the project possible, Kenichi summons his backhoe and puts on a little show for the audience. The crowd is captivated as he expertly balances a log on the end of the backhoe, a skill so impressive that everyone wonders where he learned to do that. After the ceremony concludes, Lady Cannon is approached by Viscount Thunbergia, who is incredulous that the mage who defeated Shadba is actually in Astrantia. He had been convinced that Lady Cannon would eventually lose her land and be forced to flee the country. Instead, she laughs in his face, joking that his remark is almost as funny as the excuse for the shaggy look and that Dan mustache on his face. Kenichi observes the exchange and assumes it's just another rivalry among nobles. However, Primula notices something unsettling. An old man is riding in Thunberge's carriage, the same man who was stripped of his status in Dahlia when it was revealed that he had hired Shadba to kidnap Primula. The following day, Kenichi meets with Mr. Eupatorium, Lady Cannon's husband, who wants to personally thank him for all the assistance provided in completing the project. He admits that he hadn't put much effort into maintaining his territory before, but after nearly losing it due to the tight deadline, he's determined to turn over a new leaf. He also mentions that there's one more matter he wishes to discuss with Kenichi. He found one of the pictures Kenichi sold some time ago and is keen to learn how Kenichi created it. Kenichi then proceeds to demonstrate the entire printing process to Mr. Eupatorium, who listens with wide-eyed excitement, hanging on every word. But little does he know that he's being schooled by the very man who makes his wife crave his damn cucumber. After Kenichi finishes teaching him how to produce the pictures, their discussion resumes. Mr. Eupatorium then expresses his desire to hire Primula to manage Astrantia's finances. Primula is deeply grateful for the opportunity, but realizing it might be too much for her to handle alone, she asks Mr. Eupatorium if she can seek her father's support. Mr. Eupatorium, well aware of how influential Malow from the Malow Trading Company is over in Dahlia, would be more than happy to have such an excellent merchant work with him. Yet he hesitates because establishing a connection with one of Dahlia's most influential merchants might provoke Thogalum to act. Kenichi, having heard plenty about Thogalum lately, questions why Mr. Eupatorium doesn't just kick Thogalum out of Astrantia, since it's clear he isn't well liked. Embarrassed to admit it, Mr. Eupatorium confesses that with the current budget in Astrantia, they simply can't afford a night order. In a battle against Thogalum and his men, they'd inevitably lose. But then Lady Cannon steps in and tells her husband that they actually stand a good chance of winning thanks to Kenichi and his magical machine. After all, he's her friend. Though Kenichi isn't fond of getting entangled in troublesome matters, he agrees to help fight Thogalum, if it ever comes down to it, given the gravity of the situation. Later that evening, Kenichi and his team return to their original location, and he sets about restoring their house. They also secure the high-protection grimoire promised by Lady Cannon, paving the way for Anemone to soon begin her spell training. For now, though, everyone gathers to relax, taking a long, soothing bath under the stars. And while the group bathing together, Nyamena casually remarks that Anemone's impressive magic abilities must have come from her mother. Kenichi nods in agreement, and with a note of curiosity, asks Anemone if she knows anything about her biological mother. With a wistful sigh, she confesses that she has no idea because she was raised by a kind woman on the streets after her real mother passed away, and she doesn't want to search for her lost family because she's now content living with Kenichi, and not wanting to disrupt that bond. The next morning, Kenichi and Anemone visit the old lady wizard who specializes in registering high-protection spell books. As Anemone eagerly flips through the ancient pages of the spell book, Kenichi inquires if the old lady has ever heard of a gifted young mage who died on the streets about 10 years ago. The old lady, understanding that Kenichi is secretly searching for clues about Anemone's past, admits that while she doesn't recall any such tragic tale, she does remember a remarkably talented black-haired mage known as the Silver Armiria, who mysteriously disappeared a decade ago. According to her records, Armiria was the previous owner of the very high protection spell book that now rests in Anemone's hands, a coincidence she finds too significant to ignore. However, with a touch of bitter humor, she warns Kenichi not to waste his time tracking down Anemone's family, claiming that it's obvious she's in love with him. Kenichi is taken aback and firmly retorts that he is too old for her, and that Anemone is like a daughter to him. Soon after, Kenichi returns home with Anemone and Miele, but on the way home, Anemone decides to practice casting the high protection spell. She manages to create a barrier that lasts barely a second before it shatters, and she collapses in frustration. As Kenichi rushes over to comfort her, she confesses that her stomach is hurting. Alarmed, Kenichi frantically searches online for stomach ache medicine, but Miele, ever perceptive, soon detects an unusual scent. She informs Kenichi that Anemone has just begun her first period, so realization dawns on him, and he quickly escorts her back home. Fortunately, Primula returns from work just in time. She sits down with Anemone for a heartfelt conversation about periods and the changes they bring. And later, with a mix of humor and relief, Anemone runs outside, exclaiming cheerfully to Kenichi that she can now have babies. Kenichi tells Anemone that it's good for her. Then, to his astonishment, she blurts out that she wants his babies. He spits his coffee out in shock and tells her firmly that she's at least 5 years too young to consider anything like that shit. Primula, however, is not amused. She playfully tugs at Kenichi's ears and asks if he's being serious. With a wry smile, Kenichi explains that he's just distracting Anemone for now. After all, when she grows up, she'll find someone else to marry. A few days later, while Kenichi is busy working on the cliff behind his house, he spots a carriage gliding on water. His surprise doubles when Malow steps out of it. Greeting them warmly, Malow congratulates Primula on her booming business before turning to discuss how to handle Thogalum. Kenichi quickly cuts off the overeager merchant, insisting that before they even talk about business rivals, it must address something far more important. He sets up a picnic under a large beach umbrella, and soon enough both Primula and Malow forget everything and only become engrossed in speculating about the umbrella's potential as a business asset. After the lighthearted moment, Kenichi formally asks Malow for permission to marry his daughter. Malow laughs it off, teasing that he can't do anything now since Primula has already barged into his house. The exchange warms their hearts, and later Kenichi throws a party in honor of his father-in-law, celebrating their newfound familial bond. Soon after, Malow begins working to expand his influence in the city's market. Meanwhile, old friends come to visit Kenichi. Crouchman arrives accompanied by Paul. Paul is initially delighted to see Primula, but his joy quickly turns to heartbreak when he learns she married Kenichi. He had hoped she was merely shy when she disappeared after his proposal, but now he accepts that he had no chance, resigning himself to the fact that Primula chose the better older man. With another strong ally by his side, Kenichi sets his sights on dealing with Thogalum. He heads to the market, where Lady Cannon and her husband are also present to confront the nefarious merchant once and for all. Kenichi then strides confidently over to Thogalum's trading company stalls and asks if they're interested in buying goods. An eager merchant nods as Kenichi proudly announces he has something valuable to sell, and without hesitation, he pulls the corpse of a giant spider monster straight from his item box. Chaos erupts in the market as onlookers panic, and then the merchant blurts out asking if Kenichi is trying to pick a fight. Kenichi coolly confirms that he is indeed, and moments later, Thogalum's goons swarm in, weapons drawn, even before Thogalum himself appears. His lackeys quickly identify Kenichi, exclaiming that he's the mage who's been disrupting their business. Kenichi retorts sharply, vowing that he'll pay back every bit for harassing his wife. In response, Thogalum orders his goons to attack, confident that Kenichi is on his own. But Kenichi isn't alone because Paul, Croton, and several others rush to his aid. Despite Thogalum's boastful assurance of superior numbers, everything changes when Vel leaps in front of Kenichi. The sight of the sacred bobcat, a cherished member of Kenichi's family, sends the catfolk reeling, and they turn tail and flee, unwilling to face such a formidable foe. Forced to retreat, Thogalum slinks back into his stronghold. Undeterred, Kenichi and his crew press on inside, where they soon encounter a gang of dog mercenaries who show no hesitation in challenging a bobcat. Vel becomes visibly agitated upon seeing their leader, and in that moment, Kenichi realizes that this very dog is the scoundrel who once harmed her. The dog mercenaries immediately launch an attack, and Paul steps forward to engage their leader. Meanwhile, Miley and Nyamena showcase their flawless archery skills against the rest of the mercenaries, while a friend of Krupin helps push the dogs back. The head dog battles Paul fiercely, matching him blow for blow. Deciding to tip the scales, Kenichi joins the fray by summoning his mini excavator. He starts demolishing Thogolem's estate, hurling stones at the goons to knock them out cold. Realizing he's now isolated, Thogolem attempts to flee, but Kenichi gives chase. Once outside, Kenichi returns the mini excavator to his item box and summons a larger excavator to level Thogolem's shop. As the building crumbles under his assault, Thogolem panics. Just then, Malow intervenes, urging Kenichi to cease the destruction, pointing out that the building could serve as their headquarters in this city. Thogolem curses both Malow and Kenichi, threatening that the law will punish them for trying to kill him. With a defiant smirk, Kenichi fires back, declaring that the moment Thogolem ordered his goons to unsheathe their weapons, he had effectively branded himself as a conspirator against the Viscount's life. The irate Thogolem barely comprehends what's unfolding when the Viscount steps forward, acting as if Thogolem had been plotting to kill him, thereby giving Kenichi a valid excuse for his abrupt intervention. The Viscount declares that if Thogolem abandons his property and permanently leaves the city, his crimes will be forgiven. Cornered by circumstance, Thogolem has no option but to accept the offer to save himself. Before departing, however, he tells Malow that he has found a good partner in Kenichi, but he also warns him to consider carefully why his daughter was kidnapped. Just then, a messenger from the royal capital arrives with urgent news. The king has summoned the mage known as Kenichi immediately. The Viscount confirms the letter's authenticity, and Thogolem laughs bitterly, remarking that the nail that sticks out gets hammered before slinking away. Kenichi, meanwhile, is left deep in thought over Thogolem's parting words. He begins to suspect that the true reason behind Primula's kidnapping is rooted in jealousy, some powerful people envious of the soaring value of the Malow company since his alliance might have orchestrated it. The realization that his actions might have endangered Primula fills Kenichi with burning anger, and he vows to ensure her safety from that day forward. That night, as the town settles down, Kenichi gathers Primula and Malow and announces that he won't be supplying them with any new items for the time being in order to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Primula, however, refuses to accept that his actions have placed her in danger. She argues that taking risks is part of earning a profit, even if it means facing kidnapping, and declares with resolute determination that she doesn't care about the consequences because she's chosen to spend her life with him. She reminds him that the royal family was bound to call on him sooner or later, and now she wants to stand by his side through it all. The next day, Krutum departs with his wife and daughter to settle into his new home in Paul's territory. Meanwhile, an emotional Anemoan bids farewell to her best friend Mary. Afterward, Kenichi decides to make his own move. He packs up his belongings and then asks both Lady Canon and the Viscount what the consequences would be if he were to run away instead of heading to the capital. Their panicked responses make it clear that such an act would be seen as rebellion, and they would be held responsible for allowing him to escape. Realizing he has no viable alternative, Kenichi resolves to go to the royal capital, and his girls refuse to leave him, no matter what he says. The group eventually reaches the royal capital, a stunning city, albeit with a maze-like network of roads that causes Kenichi to lose his way. While wandering, he unexpectedly stumbles upon a patrol of castle guards. Quickly, he flashes the letter from the king, and after about an hour, the guards return accompanied by the princess and her entourage. The princess is overjoyed to finally meet the famed Kenichi, especially considering that only 2 weeks have passed since the letter was sent, leaving everyone astonished at how swiftly he arrived. Her advisors demand an explanation, and Kenichi casually replies that he simply drove here on his magical beast. At that, the princess becomes insistent, and she wants to see this magical transport for herself. Kenichi obliges by summoning his car, which exceeds all her expectations in beauty and power. She eagerly requests a ride, and although Kenichi agrees while driving, he warns her with a teasing edge that accepting rides from strangers can be risky, and jokingly tells her what if he decided to kidnap her. But to his amusement, the princess finds the notion thrilling and even says that she wouldn't mind being kidnapped. Realizing he doesn't want to risk becoming a fugitive, Kenichi prudently drives her back to the castle gates. Once there, as the princess disembarks, her advisors launch into a flurry of scolding over her choice to ride in an unfamiliar magic beast. They insist that if anything were to happen, the king would have them all beheaded until they learn caution. Unperturbed, the princess retorts that they should simply resign if they can't handle her behavior. Then, with a sparkle in her eye, she confesses that she truly likes Kenichi, and in a surprising gesture of affection, she tells him he can call her Lilith. She adds that since he has been so delightful to be around, she'll grant him any reward he desires. Kenichi pauses thoughtfully before asking Lilith if she would permit him to use a portion of the garden's land to set up a campsite. The request catches her off guard, as she wonders why he wouldn't just stay in the castle's quarters. Kenichi explains that he has beast folk in his family, and many places do not accommodate them, so he wants to ensure they can all remain together. Understanding his predicament, the princess agrees to let him camp in the garden. And since Kenichi arrived early, it appears that he might have to wait up to a month before he can secure a formal audience with the king. Then we see that Kenichi and his group are escorted to the designated section of the garden where they plan to set up their new dwelling. As soon as Kenichi summons his house, Lilith lights up with excitement and dashes inside to explore every nook and cranny. Kenichi follows shortly after, trying to persuade her to come out, but Lilith, her eyes sparkling with determination, insists she wants to stay there permanently. Her advisors immediately caution her that she's overstepping, and Kenichi, ever the pragmatist, asks if she's truly sure about this decision. After all, he doesn't have much in the way of lavish hospitality to offer. Still, Lilith is perfectly content with merely being there, so Kenichi resolves not to interfere. He continues setting up the house, even placing a second room. With most of the house built, the only remaining task is to create a bathroom. Kenichi summons his trusty backhoe and prepares to begin digging when unexpectedly Lilith climbs into the machine and perches on his lap. Having heard countless tales about the backhoe's inner workings, she wants a front row seat to witness it in action. Seeing no harm in her curiosity, Kenichi proceeds with his work. Once he finishes, he carefully carries the princess out of the backhoe. However, as soon as she emerges, a knight in the princess's service draws his sword and shouts at Kenichi for his casual handling of her. The knight then lunges at him with lethal intent. Quick on his feet, Kenichi conjures a shield to block the attack and pulls out a crossbow in retaliation. The knight retreats momentarily to dodge the crossbow bolt, but Anemone, who refuses to let anyone harm Kenichi, launches a fiery attack at the assailant. The royal mage intervenes, blocking the fireball, just as Anemone readies herself to fire another. Before she can, however, Lilith steps in between, insisting that the fighting stop. Impressed by Anemone's youthful prowess and magic, Lilith formally introduces herself to her and inquires about the other spells she can cast. With a shy face, Anemone reveals that she's also mastered explosion magic, a feat so impressive that had she unleashed it, the knight and all of them would have been reduced to nothing more than pink dust. Later that evening, Kenichi begins preparing dinner, and the princess is instantly captivated by the delicious aroma wafting from the kitchen. However, she's puzzled by the unfamiliar white substance on her plate. Kenichi explains that it's called rice, and if she isn't comfortable with it, he could easily serve her some bread instead. But she insists she prefers the rice. Once the meal is ready, Kenichi serves Lilith a generous helping of rice and curry, and she devours it with unbridled delight. Curious, she asks if it's common for ordinary folk to enjoy such delectable fare, explaining that she's never tasted anything like it before. Kenichi sighs and explains that spices are nearly impossible for commoners to obtain because the Spice Syndicate keeps hiking up the prices. Lilith, well aware of the Spice Syndicate's long-standing nuisance, then inquires if Kenichi knows exactly which spices were used to craft the dish. Unfortunately, Kenichi admits he isn't the one who prepared it, though he offers to give her a can of those spices so she can try to replicate the flavor herself. Taking that as a challenge, the princess eagerly decides to experiment with the spice blend. Meanwhile, she finds herself particularly fond of the spoon and plate Kenichi provided, and she asks if she can purchase them. Kenichi agrees, but first he wants to confer with Primula. He explains that under normal circumstances, he would sell the plate for 20 gold and the spoon for 10 gold. However, since it's the princess buying, he figures he might set the price at 20 gold for each. Ultimately, he tells her it will cost 40 gold for one set, and Lilith is delighted by the bargain, so much so that she decides to buy 10 sets. Kenichi happily supplies the exquisite dinnerware, and Lilith is pleasantly surprised. She had almost doubted his claim to be a legitimate merchant. Now that she's convinced of his trade skills, she casually asks if he happens to have any black market items available. Kenichi neither confirms nor denies, and he will not give her anything illicit. Meanwhile, as Kenichi and Lilith converse, Anemone begins to feel a twinge of jealousy over the closeness between him and the princess. Lilith, however, is puzzled by Anemone's reaction, having assumed that Anemone was Kenichi's daughter. Although Kenichi does consider Anemone as his own, he makes it clear that they share no blood relation. Later that night, Kenichi allows Lilith to take a long, relaxing bath while he deliberately stays far away. He's not about to risk getting pulled into another messy situation. Not wanting to share a room with the princess either, he lets Primula and Anemone remain inside with Lilith, while he camps out with Nyamina and Maeli. However, during the night, both Nyamina and Maeli suddenly spring up, their senses alerting them to something unusual lurking nearby. The next morning, Kenichi rises bright and early, and a few minutes later, Lilith follows suit, summoning her maids to dress her so she can start her day. Over the following days, Lilith keeps asking Kenichi for favors, one of which is to resolve the rat infestation in the castle. Taking her requests seriously, Kenichi heads down into the tunnels armed with a metric ton of rat poison, successfully exterminating over 1,000 rats in one go. On another day, Lilith organizes an auction for the giant spider corpse stored in Kenichi's item box. Later, she even challenges Kenichi to stage a fake kidnapping to test if he can actually get away with it. Rising to the challenge, Kenichi grabs her and scales the castle walls, proving that he could easily abscond with her if he so wished. The following day, wanting to do something nice for Kenichi, Lilith presents him with a curry her chefs have prepared. Although it appears green, its taste is amazing, prompting Kenichi to compliment the chefs for perfectly recreating the elusive curry spice. Suddenly, Lilith inquires if Kenichi has any food in his item box that her chefs wouldn't be able to replicate. Taking that as a challenge, he produces a box of luxury chocolates. The princess tastes a piece and is astonished by its exquisite sweetness. She can passes a piece to her head chef, who admits in awe that with his current skills, he could never recreate such a delicacy. The next day, as Lilith finishes her duties, she eagerly goes out to meet Kenichi. Over dinner, both Nyamena and Miley mention that they sense something strange out there again, and all the maids seem on edge. Lilith then explains that rumors have been circulating about the castle being haunted after all countless souls had died protecting the royal family, and many of them surely harbored grudges even after passing on, so it stood to reason that a few restless spirits would still be roaming the halls. The maids are visibly terrified by the lingering presence of ghosts, so they urgently beg Lilith to have Kenichi expel the spirits from the castle. Although Lilith herself remains indifferent to these apparitions, she understands her maid's distress and asks Kenichi if he knows how to banish one. Kenichi agrees to take action, but only on the condition that Nyamena and Meili, the only ones sensitive enough to detect the ghost, be allowed to accompany him into the castle. Lilith consents to his terms, though Kenichi still finds himself uncertain about how to combat a ghost in the first place. After some searching in his online market, Kenichi purchases a sprayer and fills it with holy water. As they traverse the castle's long, echoing halls, Nyamena and Meili suddenly point toward a shadowy corner, insisting they sense something amiss. Kenichi sprays the area liberally with the holy water, and the girls quickly confirm that the ghostly presence has vanished. With that troublesome spot cleared, Lilith leads Kenichi next to the maid's quarters, where another spirit is reportedly causing unrest. Again, Nyamena and Meili direct him to the exact location, and he repeats the spraying process. This time, all the maids breathe a collective sigh of relief, reporting that they no longer feel the ghost's presence. Although Kenichi wonders if he's truly exorcising the spirits or if it's merely a placebo effect, he diligently continues his rounds, spraying holy water wherever the girls detect any residual energy. The final location is the queen's bedroom, a place of growing complaints due to restless sleep caused by an unshakable spirit. Nervously, Kenichi enters the royal chamber, but with Lilith's reassuring words, he proceeds with the exorcism. Noticing that Vel is fixated on a vase on the desk, Kenichi picks it up and tries spraying around it, but the spirit stubbornly clings on. Concluding that the vase might be harboring the ghost, he advises Lilith that it would be best if the queen removed it to fully rid the room of the specter. Grateful for his assistance, Lilith rewards Kenichi by granting him special permission to access any of the magic books in the royal library. However, strict rules prohibit removing any books from the library. Not one to be deterred, Kenichi decides to pirate the knowledge instead. He sets up a photocopier and begins scanning every page of the coveted tomes, determined that soon they'll have the contents of these books at their fingertips. After 4.5 hours of hard work, they've managed to copy around 35 books, ensuring that he and his allies can study them later. It's become late, so Kenichi and Anemone finally leave the library. When they step outside, they run into a maid whose job is to ensure no one has filched any of the incredibly valuable books. She meticulously checks every shelf, finds everything intact, and then grudgingly allows them to pass. Later that night, Kenichi is summoned into a private room along with the princess and one of her maids. The princess, with a playful glint in her eye, boldly asserts that women like the maid Malin are clearly Kenichi's type, and therefore as his reward, he may do as he pleases with her. Kenichi admits that Malin is indeed his type but initially refuses, insisting that he is already married to Primula. Lilith is surprised by Kenichi's honesty to his wife because she's heard that some nobles love using magic devices to tease their partners, and she presses him further, questioning whether he truly has anything hidden in his item box. Finally, Kenichi confesses and even purchases a more daring outfit for Malin. Then when Malin urges him to take it slow, he approaches her, and amid a flurry of excited screams, it becomes clear that Kenichi has sealed yet another deal with Lilith. After that eventful day, the time finally comes for Kenichi to meet with the king, and the group is promptly guided to the designated meeting place. Afterward, Kenichi steps into the audience hall, only to find a crowd of nobles already gathered, something he clearly didn't expect. Around the room, whispers and judgmental glances start spreading, and it's obvious many of them aren't pleased about beast folk being allowed into such a formal space. Kenichi and his family lower themselves in a respectful bow before the royal presence, and one of the king's attendants informs him that he'll be facing an opponent right now in front of His Majesty. His challenger is none other than Melissa, the royal capital's new prodigy, and with that, Kenichi understands exactly why the nobles are swarming this place. Melissa scoffs, saying she didn't imagine her opponent would be some old man when she heard rumors of a powerful frontier mage. She also mocks him for dragging his entire family into the situation, calling it a reckless decision. Then, without wasting time, she summons a lesser dragon, while Kenichi responds by calling forth his excavator. Melissa looks a little surprised, but quickly comments that while his beast may be bigger, it doesn't seem impressive at all. The dragon then launches a breath of fire toward Kenichi's group. They manage to hold their ground through the blast, but some nobles seated closer to the floor aren't as lucky because they're hit directly. Kenichi pauses, wondering if anyone's going to react, but the rest of the nobles barely flinch. They just laugh it off, entertained by the chaos, so the whole thing feels wrong to him. Miley and Nyamena fire off their arrows, but the dragon's scales shove them off with ease. Kenichi follows up with a direct assault using the excavator. He manages to hurl the dragon across the chamber, but still can't land a solid finishing strike. Right after that, Anemone casts her explosion spell, but even that doesn't do enough damage, so Kenichi realizes the dragon's magic resistance is way beyond what they dealt with fighting the cave spider. The dragon counters, crashing into the excavator and sending it sliding uncontrollably. It prepares another blast of fire. Kenichi wants to dodge, but the machine won't stop skidding. But just before impact, Anemone casts high protection, shielding everyone from the flames. People watching are stunned that she can pull off high protection too. Miley and Nyamena then manage to land precise shots in both of the dragon's eyes. Blinded and furious, the creature begins thrashing wildly, launching fire breath in random directions. It barrels into the excavator instinctively, trying to destroy it. The nobles watching from above assume this is the end, and a few even seem disappointed, like they were hoping to see Kenichi burned alive. But Anemone isn't done yet, so she calmly pulls out a golem core she crafted herself and begins forming a golem on the spot. The nobles are visibly shocked to witness a commoner's child unleashing such high-level magic, but despite her effort, she only manages to form the golem's arm. They laugh mockingly at the result, but the damn single arm grabs the dragon and hurls it into the seating area, crashing onto several nobles. Even that doesn't bring the creature down completely, and Kenichi steps in to land the decisive strike using his excavator. The battle ends in their victory, but Kenichi quickly notices that Anemone is bleeding, clearly the result of pushing her magic too far, and that shit makes anger flares inside him. Grabbing a megaphone, he thanks the king for the invitation, but then without holding back, he declares that he's furious after seeing his family's lives placed at risk. So he announces that he's going to unleash his summoned beast to bring the entire audience chamber crumbling down, and once it's done, he'll escape this place, and along with it, drag the whole nation into ruin. The nobles are convinced he's bluffing, thinking he's let his ego get to his head. But Kenichi, snapping out of the heat of the moment, realizes what he's just said. Turning to Primula, he apologizes for his reckless outburst and for dragging everyone into danger because of it. But Primula, calm and steady, tells him it's fine. She reminds him of her own words that wherever he goes, she's going too. She has no intention of backing away, and the others around her seem to share that resolve. Kenichi is touched by their loyalty, but he also points out that running now would destroy any chance they have at living peacefully again. Worse, it could cause serious problems for Malow and everyone involved with their trading business. But Primula doesn't waver. She assures him that even if the worst happens, no one will hold it against him. Right then, soldiers storm into the chamber, ready to take Kenichi and his companions by force. But before they can act, Lilith steps forward and stops them. She says she understands how Kenichi feels. Even if the ones watching are royalty, that doesn't give them the right to treat someone like a showpiece for their entertainment. She thinks his anger is justified, his family was endangered, and he had every right to be furious, but warns him that running away now would only destroy the peace he wants so badly. As tensions rise, the nobles begin turning their resentment toward him, but Lilith steps in with an alternative. Kenichi asks her what she means, and she tells him plainly he has to become hers. He immediately refuses, making it clear he has no interest in being turned into some royal toy. Lilith, unfazed, changes her tone and instead asks for a gift. Her birthday is coming up, and if his present is impressive enough, she might persuade her father to forgive this incident and issue a formal statement declaring that no grudges remain between them. Kenichi figures out that what Lilith really wants is something none of the nobles present could ever hope to offer. She then hints that ordinary jewelry won't impress her, saying it'll take more than that to catch her interest. Kenichi understands she's challenging him outright, and he's more than willing to meet that challenge. He decides to give her a piece of jewelry, but the problem is he's not sure what would be good enough. Primula tells him not to stress about it. She reminds him that everything he crafts is high quality, but the most striking thing about his work is how every item he makes carries the same signature form. She encourages him to use that uniqueness to his advantage, and with that in mind, he decides to give Lilith a pearl necklace. Lilith is genuinely taken aback when she sees it because all the pearls are identical in color and luster, something that shouldn't even be possible. She's clearly delighted, though at the same time, the queen doesn't seem too thrilled. Jealousy quietly creeps into her gaze. Lilith then hands him a formal document, one that proves all his operations and clears up any potential conflicts. Kenichi isn't entirely pleased with the outcome, but since it resolves things peacefully, he accepts it. Still, he quickly catches the queen's sharp stare. There's no mistaking her irritation. She asks if he doesn't have anything for her as well, especially after giving such a stunning gift to her daughter. Kenichi casually replies that the necklace was simply an early birthday present for Lilith. The queen, not one to be outdone, states that her birthday is coming up too. That's when Kenichi recalls Lilith's words that the queen and her daughter tend to compete over everything. So he plays along, saying that he also has something prepared for her and presents her with another necklace, this one strung with even larger pearls. The nobles in the room are left speechless. They whisper among themselves, trying to estimate the cost. Some even think that if the queen demanded a gift like this from her subjects, it would bankrupt an entire region. The queen, however, loves it. Still, she insists she can't accept something this valuable without giving something in return. So she hands Kenichi a key. He looks at it puzzled, and she explains it's the key to her personal chambers, and he's welcome to spend the night with her whenever he wishes. Kenichi pauses, his thoughts dry and unimpressed, and he starts wondering if the nobles in this world really think they can repay priceless gifts with their bodies. But before he can even respond, Lilith cuts in, telling her mother not to joke around. Kenichi too asks if she's serious, but the queen changes the subject because she clearly doesn't appreciate the fact that he calls Lilith by name, but still refers to her by her title. So she tells him to drop the formalities and call her Amara, a short version of her full name Amaranthus. Kenichi agrees, and then he asks the queen if there's any old furniture lying around the palace. She says there is, and he coolly replies that he'll just take that instead of that damn key. The scene then shifts to the queen personally leading Kenichi into one of the palace's storage rooms. As he scans the place, he quickly realizes that the furniture kept here carries an incredibly high price tag, though considering these are royal belongings, it makes sense. While he casually begins moving the furniture out without much trouble, the queen watches with amused curiosity and suddenly asks if he'd be willing to carry her away too. Before she can take the flirtation any further, Lilith cuts her off, clearly fed up with her mother's antics. Kenichi meanwhile notices something unusual. A certain vase he'd once asked Lilith to remove from her room is sitting right there in this very room. The queen, noticing where his eyes landed, smiles and tells him that thanks to his actions, she's been able to enjoy proper sleep lately. That's when it clicks for Kenichi. The flower vase had been the reason behind her sleepless nights. She goes on to explain that after looking into it, they interrogated the noble who had sent the vase as a gift, and he admitted he knew it was cursed when he handed it over. Kenichi asks why anyone would do such a thing, and she answers him plainly. The goal was to kill her. She reveals that the man responsible was among the nobles who were taken out earlier by the lesser dragon's breath during the match. Kenichi immediately suspects that the queen might have arranged for their deaths in that chaos, but she gives no direct answer. She simply explains that the man was a known figure in the anti-royalist faction, a group that has long opposed the authority of the crown. She then says that lately the faction has been especially agitated due to the movements of Thunbergia from Achimans, one of their more desperate actors, holding the lowest ranks within the anti-royal group. He's been working behind the scenes, orchestrating underhanded moves to gain control over Astrantia, the neighboring land, and part of that effort included deploying one of his agents into the city. Kenichi immediately understands that she's referring to Thogalum, and the queen confirms this and adds that the anti-royalist camp has also built up networks of bandits and mercenaries to further their plans. Recently, Astrantia has also been pushing to annex Dahlia, another nearby region, and Kenichi realizes that the assault by Shaga's forces wasn't just a random event. It was part of a bigger play. He also learns that the queen already knows he was the one who took care of Shaga, and instead of being angry, she thanks him because that incident helped delay the royal faction's advance, buying them a little more time to stabilize the situation. Later on, Melissa approaches Anemone and asks where she learned to cast High Protection. In response, Anemone shows her a grimoire, explaining that she studied the spell from it. She mentions having heard that the book once belonged to someone named Silver Armeria. Curious, Melissa flips through the grimoire and then asks if Anemone can read the magical script inside. Anemone admits she hasn't learned how to read magical writing yet. Melissa, however, notices something embedded in the text. She deciphers a hidden message written in magic script and reads it aloud. It's a personal note left by Silver Armeria, saying that this grimoire was meant for her daughter Anemone, and she hopes one day her daughter will find it. Melissa looks at her and tells her to hold on to this book. It's something she should cherish as a keepsake from someone important. Before leaving, Melissa adds with a small grin that she won't lose next time. A few days later, Kenichi is officially awarded ownership of a place called Estilby Lakefront. As it turns out, the land he's received is the very area stretching out in front of his home. With land now under his name, he could no longer remain a commoner and was granted the noble rank of baron. Shortly after, we see him on the road again, this time riding in a van. He explains that he had to buy it because the princess and her maid decided to tag along with them. Then we learn that when Lilith asked her father for permission to go with Kenichi, the king refused at first. But then Lilith threatened to leave the royal family altogether if he didn't approve, and with no other choice, he gave in. Of course, the arrangement was made under the excuse that she would be monitoring Kenichi's movements just to save face. As they continue on a journey, they happen to run into Fuyu along the way. They take a short break to catch up, and Fuyu offers an apology for his previous attitude, now that Kenichi holds noble status. But Kenichi brushes it off and tells him to treat him the same as always. Fuyu also notices that Kenichi's family seems to have grown since last time. Then as Kenichi gets back on the road, he looks ahead with a calm heart, finally feeling like his quiet, peaceful life is about to begin for real.